I can still remember the exact moment my life fell apart. It was a Tuesday evening in October. I was making dinner, chicken parmesan, Richard's favorite, when I found the email. His laptop was open on the kitchen counter while he showered upstairs. Preparing for what he'd told me was another late meeting at the office. One notification popped up in the corner of the screen. From Jessica. Subject line: "Can't wait until tonight." I shouldn't have clicked it. 15 years of marriage had built a trust that I'd never thought to question. But something in my gut twisted when I saw her name. Jessica Reynolds, his new executive assistant, hired just 6 months ago. Young, ambitious, with legs that seemed to go on forever, and a laugh that carried down the hallway whenever I visited Richard at work. The email was short but devastating in its intimacy. "The hotel is booked. Can't wait to feel your hands on." Me again? Last night was incredible. I stood frozen, the wooden spoon in my hand dripping tomato sauce onto the pristine white tile floor. My mind raced to make sense of it, to find some innocent explanation, a mistake, a joke. Anything but the obvious truth that was staring me in the face. The shower upstairs shut off. I had minutes, maybe seconds, to decide what to do. Confront him now? Pretend I'd seen nothing? I closed the email, my hands shaking, and returned to the stove as if my entire world hadn't just shifted on its axis. Richard came downstairs 15 minutes later, dressed in his best suit, the one I'd bought him for his last birthday. His cologne, the expensive one from that boutique in Paris during our anniversary trip, drifted across the kitchen. "Sorry, Emily, running late," he said, barely glancing at me as he grabbed his keys from the counter. "Don't wait up." "Late meeting?" I asked, my voice remarkably steady despite the hurricane raging inside me. "Yeah, the Peterson account. We're close to closing it." He leaned over to kiss my cheek, a gesture so routine he probably didn't even think about it anymore. I turned my face away. "The sauce might stain your tie." If he noticed anything unusual in my behavior, he didn't show it. "Right, thanks. I'll grab something at the restaurant anyway." Restaurant, not office. Another lie, so casual it probably didn't even register to him as deception anymore. "Richard," I said as he reached the door, "is there something you want to tell me?" He paused, one hand on the doorknob, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. But then it was gone, replaced by the confident smile that had charmed me at a friend's wedding 18 years ago. Nothing that, "Can't wait until tomorrow. Don't forget, we have the company gala on Friday. Your blue dress would be perfect." And then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded like finality. I stood in our kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of a dinner he wouldn't eat, in a home that suddenly felt like a stage set. Beautiful, but false. 15 years of marriage. A shared business that had grown from a struggling startup in our garage to a multi-million-dollar real estate development company. All of it built on what I now realized was shifting sand. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I turned off the stove, put away the food, and opened my laptop. By midnight, I had access to all our accounts, personal and business. By 2 a.m., I had found the hotel charges, the jewelry store receipts, the secret credit card I never knew existed. By dawn, I had contacted a lawyer. When Richard came home the next evening, wearing the same suit but considerably more rumpled, I was waiting in the living room with a glass of his favorite scotch. Not for him. For me. "We need to talk," I said, my voice still remarkably calm despite having not slept for over 30 hours. "About Jessica, about the hotel rooms, about everything." His face drained of color. No denials, no excuses, just the look of a man who knew the game was up. "Emily, I can explain." "I'm sure you can," I interrupted. "You've always been good with explanations, with words, with making people believe whatever you want them to believe. But I'm not interested in explanations anymore, Richard. I'm interested in facts. And the fact is, You've been sleeping with your assistant while lying to my face." He sank into the chair opposite me, suddenly looking every bit his 45 years. "It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think. The only question now is what happens next." What happened next would shock us both. Because what Richard didn't know, what he couldn't have known as he sat there preparing to negotiate his way out of his betrayal, was that I had discovered something far more significant than his affair during my night of investigation. Something that would change everything about our divorce, about our company, about the building that housed Richard's growing empire, the building that, as it turned out, was still legally in my name alone. Richard and I met 18 years ago at my college roommate's wedding. I was 30, focused on my fledgling commercial real estate business. Just me and a tiny office downtown, struggling to get established in a male-dominated industry. He was 32, charismatic, with an architecture degree and big dreams of developing innovative office spaces. "You find the properties, I'll design the buildings," he'd said on our third date, eyes alight with possibility. We could be unstoppable together. And for a long time, we were. I had the eye for undervalued properties and the negotiation skills to acquire them at the right price. Richard had the vision to transform outdated buildings into modern workspaces that companies fought to lease. We married after 3 years of dating, and our business, Wallace Development, grew alongside our relationship. The first major success came when I found an abandoned warehouse on the edge of downtown. The location was perfect, close enough to the business district but with cheaper land costs. The building itself was a disaster, but I saw the potential. "It's a money pit," Richard had argued when I first showed him the property. "It's an opportunity," I countered. "The area's developing. 5 years from now, we won't be able to touch anything in this neighborhood." I was right. We purchased the warehouse through a separate LLC that I created, Wallace Acquisitions. At the time, it made sense for tax purposes to keep it separate from our main development company. I signed the paperwork as the sole owner, with plans to transfer it to our joint business once development was complete. Richard transformed that warehouse into the most sought-after office building in the city. 6 stories of steel and glass, rising from the bones of the old structure, preserving enough industrial elements to make it unique, while adding modern amenities that commanded premium leasing rates. We moved Wallace Development's headquarters to the top floor, a symbol of our success. That building became the cornerstone of our business empire. As our reputation grew, so did our portfolio: apartment complexes, retail spaces, more office buildings, but nothing ever quite matched the perfect synergy of that first major project. Our signature building, we called it, the physical manifestation of what we could accomplish together. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Our roles shifted subtly at first, then more dramatically. Richard became the face of Wallace. Development, charming clients, giving interviews, accepting awards. I remained in the background, still finding the properties, still handling the complex financial aspects, but increasingly invisible in the public perception of our company. "It just makes sense," Richard would say whenever I raised concerns. "People respond to me. I'm good with the public-facing stuff." He wasn't wrong. Richard could sell ice to polar bears, as the saying goes. But the imbalance grew. At company events, people began to refer to me as Richard's wife, rather than his business partner. The fact that I'd found our signature building, that I'd convinced skeptical banks to finance its renovation when we had little track record, that part of our history began to fade. 5 years ago, Richard hired a PR firm to boost the company's profile. The resulting feature in Business Insider described him as a visionary developer who transformed an abandoned warehouse into the most innovative office space in the city. My name appeared once in the 15th paragraph as his supportive wife Emily. When I showed Richard the article, hurt by the erasure of my contribution, he seemed genuinely confused. "But this is great press for the company," he said, not understanding my concern. "For both of us." "It's great press for you," I corrected. "I'm barely mentioned." "Don't be so sensitive, Em. We're a team. Your name, my name. It doesn't matter as long as the business succeeds." I let it go. We were a team, after all. Partners in business and in life. What did it matter who got the credit, as long as we built something lasting together? 3 years ago, we expanded dramatically, taking on larger projects, hiring more staff. Richard brought in Jessica Reynolds as his executive assistant 8 months ago. Young, ambitious, with a business degree and what he called exceptional organizational skills. I noticed the lingering glances, the inside jokes, the way he straightened his tie whenever she entered the room. But I trusted him. After 15 years of marriage, I believed we were solid, unbreakable. I focused on a new acquisition, a struggling shopping center we could transform into a mixed-use development, and tried to ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Now, sitting across from Richard as he struggled to explain the inexplicable, I thought about that first building. Our signature building, the one everyone associated with Richard Wallace, architectural genius, the one that still on paper belonged solely to me. "How long?" I asked, interrupting his rambling explanation about loneliness and temptation and meaningless attraction. "What?" "How long have you been sleeping with Jessica?" He looked down at his hands. 4 months. 4 months, while I was negotiating the shopping center deal, working late nights, thinking we were both sacrificing for our shared future. "Do you love her?" The question surprised even me. I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Richard's silence told me everything. "I see," I said, rising from the couch. "Then I think you should pack a bag." "Emily, please. We can work through this. Couples therapy, a fresh start." "No, Richard. We can't. Because this isn't just about the affair, is it? This is about how you've been gradually pushing me aside for years. In the business, in our public image, and now in our marriage." "That's not true," he protested. But the denial sounded hollow even to him. "It is true. And you know what? I let it happen. I stepped back. I let you take the spotlight. But not anymore." I moved toward the stairs, then turned back to face him. "Oh, and Richard? When you go to the office tomorrow, don't be surprised if the locks have been changed." His head snapped up. "What are you talking about?" I smiled for the first time since discovering the email. "You might want to check who actually owns the building. The paperwork was never transferred from Wallace Acquisitions. And guess who's the sole owner of that LLC?" The look on his face, confusion giving way to shocked understanding, would stay with me for a long time. In that moment, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, the betrayal still raw, but beneath it something else was emerging. Power, purpose, and a plan that was just beginning to take shape. The law offices of Patricia Chen occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, not one of our buildings, which was precisely why I'd chosen her. Patricia had a reputation for handling high-profile divorces with surgical precision and zero leaks to the press. At 58, with steel gray hair cut in a severe bob and eyes that missed nothing, she had built her practice on helping successful women protect their assets from cheating husbands. "You've put yourself in a surprisingly strong position," she said, reviewing the documents I'd brought to our early morning meeting. "Most clients come to me after the fact. You've done your homework." "I've always handled the legal aspects of our real estate deals," I explained. "I know my way around a contract." She nodded, tapping a manicured nail against the property deed. "For our signature building." "And you're certain this transfer was never completed? Wallace Development operates from the premises, pays no rent to Wallace Acquisitions?" "The transfer was drafted, but never filed. Richard got busy with the next project, I got busy with another acquisition, and it just fell through the cracks. I paused. Though I did maintain the LLC and file separate tax returns for it all these years. Patricia's lips curved in what might have been a smile. Fortuitous oversight. Very. And what exactly do you want to achieve here, Emily? Full ownership of the company? Maximum financial settlement? I considered her question carefully. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? Financial security? All of the above? I want recognition, I said finally. For 15 years, I've been the invisible partner. I found the properties. I structured the deals. I managed the finances. But Richard got the credit, the acclaim, the profile in Business Insider. I leaned forward. I want what I've earned. And I want Richard to understand exactly what he's thrown away. Patricia studied me for a long moment, then nodded. We can work with that. Let's start with the building. You have several options. 2 hours later, I left Patricia's office with a clear strategy and a meeting scheduled with a commercial real estate broker. Not one I'd worked with before, but someone Patricia recommended as discreet and effective. My phone had been buzzing periodically throughout the morning. Richard, calling from the Hilton where he'd spent the night. I let each call go to voicemail. By noon, I was sitting in my home office, listening to his increasingly desperate messages. Emily, please call me back. We need to talk about this. The board is meeting tomorrow. What am I supposed to tell them? You can't seriously be considering selling the building. That's our headquarters, our signature achievement. The last message, left just 20 minutes ago, had a different tone. Anger replacing desperation. This is ridiculous, Emily. You're being vindictive. I made a mistake, yes, but threatening the entire company? This affects more than just me. We have employees, investors. Think about what you're doing. I deleted the messages and turned off my phone. Richard always did this, shifted blame, made others responsible for fixing his mistakes. Not this time. At 3 o'clock, I arrived at Wallace Development's headquarters, our signature building, my building. The security guard smiled in recognition. Afternoon, Mrs. Wallace. Good afternoon, Joe. Is my husband in? Mr. Wallace left about an hour ago. Said he had an urgent meeting. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. That's fine. I need to pick up some files from my office. I took the elevator to the top floor, where the executive offices occupied the north side of the building with its panoramic city views. Richard's corner office, with its custom-designed furniture and award plaques covering one wall. My smaller office next door, functional and understated, and across from both, Jessica Reynolds' desk, currently empty. I walked past it without a glance and entered my office, closing the door behind me. From my window, I could see the city stretching out toward the mountains in the distance. 15 years of work represented in that skyline, buildings we'd developed, neighborhoods we'd helped transform. Our legacy. Richard's and mine. But it wasn't really ours anymore, was it? In Richard's mind, in the public perception, it had become his achievement, his company, his vision. I was just his supportive wife, Emily. The intercom on my desk buzzed, startling me from my thoughts. Mrs. Wallace? The receptionist's voice, hesitant. Mr. Wallace is on line 1. He's quite insistent. I stared at the blinking light on the phone for a long moment, then pressed the button. Put him through. Richard's voice came immediately, tense and controlled. Emily, finally. We need to talk. We are talking. In person. This has gone far. Enough. I disagree. I think this has only just begun. A pause. I spoke with the company attorney. He says there might have been an oversight with the building ownership, but it's easily corrected. The clear intent was for the property to be transferred to Wallace Development. Intent isn't binding, Richard. You know that. We've used that. Fact to our advantage in enough deals. What do you want? His voice sharpened. Money? Fine. Name your price. It's not about money. Then what? Punishment? Is that it? You want to punish me for a stupid mistake? I gazed out at the skyline, at the city we'd helped shape together. No, Richard. I want you to understand what it feels like to have something you built taken away from you, to be erased from your own story. What are you talking about? The Business Insider profile, the visionary developer who never once mentioned his wife's role in finding and securing the very building that made his reputation. The company events where I became Richard's wife instead of your business partner. The gradual, systematic way you've made me invisible in my own company. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, that's not fair, Emily. No, it's not. None of this is fair. But it's happening anyway. I took a deep breath. The board meeting. Tomorrow is canceled. Instead, you'll be meeting with me and my attorney at 9 a.m. to discuss terms. Terms for what? For how we proceed. With the divorce. With the company. With everything. And if I refuse, then I'll put the building on the market tomorrow. I've already spoken with a broker. Another silence, longer this time. When Richard spoke again, his voice had changed. Calculating now, the tone he used when negotiating a difficult deal. You wouldn't really sell it. This building is as much your legacy as mine. Watch me. The company would collapse. All those employees, people you've worked with for years, out of jobs. That would be unfortunate, I agreed. Which is why you should make sure you're at that meeting tomorrow. I hung up without waiting for his response. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from something else entirely. Determination, resolve. The sense of finally standing up for myself after years of gradual erosion. My office door opened suddenly. I turned expecting Richard, braced for confrontation. Instead, I found myself face to face with Jessica Reynolds. Jessica stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed in a fitted charcoal suit that probably cost more than most of our employees made in a week. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her makeup flawless. She looked young, polished, confident, everything I had once been when Richard and I started the company together. Mrs. Wallace, she said, her voice carefully neutral. I didn't realize you were in today. Clearly. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. Up close, she couldn't be more than 30, 15 years my junior. Did you need something, Jessica? She hesitated, then stepped into the office, closing the door behind her. I think we should talk. About what? The Peterson account? The company gala on Friday? Or perhaps the hotel room you've been sharing with my husband. To her credit, she didn't flinch. I understand you're angry. Angry doesn't begin to cover it. But my issues with Richard are between him and me. You're just collateral damage. That's not fair. She moved further into the office, stopping a few feet from my desk. I'm not some naive secretary who got seduced by her boss. I have an MBA from Wharton. I was hired for my skills, not my looks. And yet here we are. I gestured toward the chair across from my desk. Sit down, Jessica. Let's have an honest conversation, woman to woman. She sat, perching on the edge of the chair, back straight, hands folded in her lap. Up close, I could see the tension in her shoulders, the slight tremor in her fingers despite her composed facade. She was nervous. Good. Did Richard send you? To talk to me? I asked. No. She met my gaze directly. He doesn't know I'm here. He'd probably be furious if he found out. Then why are you here? Because I respect you. At my skeptical look, she continued. I mean it. I've seen your work, the properties you've found, the deals you've structured. Half the senior staff knows you're the financial backbone of this company, even if Richard gets most of the public credit. And yet you slept with my husband. Jessica had the grace to look uncomfortable. I'm not proud of how things happened. But my relationship with Richard is separate from my professional assessment of your contributions. How magnanimous of you. My tone was acid. Let me be clear, Jessica. I don't care about your relationship with Richard, not anymore. What I care about is what happens next. What does happen next? She leaned forward slightly. There are rumors all over the office. Richard canceled tomorrow's board meeting. He's been locked in with the company attorney all morning. People are scared, Emily. The use of my first name, the presumed familiarity, hit a nerve. Mrs. Wallace, I corrected. And what happens next depends largely on your boss, my husband. Though I suppose he's both to you, isn't he? She flushed but held her ground. I care about this company. I care about the people who work here. Whatever issues exist between you and Richard, stop. I held up a hand. Let me tell you what's going to happen. Tomorrow, Richard will meet with me and my attorney. We will discuss terms for moving forward with the divorce, with the business, with the building that, as you may not know, I legally own outright. Her eyes widened slightly. The entire building? Wallace Acquisitions owns it. I am the sole owner of Wallace Acquisitions. So yes, the entire building? But that's inconvenient for Richard? Yes, I imagine it is. Jessica's professional composure slipped for a moment, revealing something harder beneath. You would really jeopardize everything? All these jobs? The company you built together, just for revenge? Is that what Richard told you? That this is about revenge? He said you're threatening to sell the building, that it would destroy the company. I studied her, seeing not just the polished exterior but the ambition beneath. Let me ask you something, Jessica. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? The question seemed to catch her off guard. Professionally, you mean? Yes. What's your endgame here? Executive position? Your own company someday? I want to run a development firm, she admitted. I've been learning everything I can from Richard about the business. From Richard, I repeated. Not from me. Not from the person who actually finds the properties, structures the deals, manages. The financial aspects that make development possible. She had the decency to look embarrassed. I didn't think that I had anything to teach you. That I was worth learning from? Yes. That's become abundantly clear. I stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. Tomorrow's meeting will determine a lot of futures, Jessica. Not just Richard's and mine. So if you truly care about this company and the people who work here, I suggest you encourage Richard to approach it with an open mind. She rose as well, hesitating before asking, Do you hate me? The question was so unexpected, so nakedly vulnerable, that it caught me off guard. For a moment, I saw not the polished homewrecker or the ambitious MBA, but a young woman who had made choices with consequences she hadn't fully anticipated. No, I said finally. I don't hate you. I don't know you well enough to hate you. But I do feel sorry for you. Why? Because Richard Wallace has a pattern. He uses people's talents, takes credit for their contributions, and discards them when they're no longer useful or interesting. I just happened to be legally married to him when I figured it out. The color drained from Jessica's face. You're wrong about him. For your sake, I hope so. I moved toward the door, opening it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with a commercial real estate broker. After Jessica left, I sat at my desk for a long time, turning our conversation over in my mind. Something she'd said kept gnawing at me. Half the senior staff knows you're the financial backbone of this company, even if Richard gets most of the public credit. Half the senior staff knows. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Michael Chen, our director of operations, who'd been with us almost from the beginning. Michael, who'd always treated me with respect as a full partner in the business, not just as Richard's wife. Emily, he answered on the second ring. I've been trying to reach you. I know. I'm sorry. Things have been complicated. Is it true? About the building? News traveled fast. Yes, but that's not why I'm calling. I need your honest assessment of something, Michael. The senior management team. If things changed at Wallace Development, who would stay? Who's loyal to the company versus loyal to Richard personally? A careful pause. That's a loaded question. I know. And I wouldn't ask if it weren't important. Michael's response was measured but revealing. Most of the operational team would stay with the company, given the opportunity. Development and architecture might be more split. Sales and marketing are largely Richard's people. And you? I've always respected both of you, Emily. But I've worked directly with you more than with Richard. You know where my loyalty lies. I felt something shift inside me, a new possibility taking shape. I may need your help, Michael. But I can't say more right now. I understand. Just tell me what you need. After we hung up, I sat looking out at the city skyline as the afternoon light began to fade. The building that had launched our success, that bore Richard's design stamp and my financial acumen, our signature achievement, my legal property. Richard had framed our situation as binary. Either I backed down and let him keep control, or I sold the building and destroyed the company. But there was a third option forming in my mind, one that Jessica's visit had inadvertently helped clarify. What if the choice wasn't between surrendering or burning it all down? What if there was another way? My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Chen, commercial broker meeting confirmed for 5 p.m. Also, curious development. Got a call from Robert Martinez at RTG Ventures. Says he has a proposition regarding Wallace Development. Wants to meet. RTG Ventures, one of our main competitors, known for aggressive acquisition of smaller development firms. The fact that they were already circling suggested rumors were spreading. Beyond our company walls. I texted back. Set up the meeting with Martinez for tomorrow afternoon, after my morning session with Richard. Then I gathered my things and headed out, nodding politely to staff members who watched me with poorly concealed curiosity. The next 24 hours would determine not just the fate of my marriage, but the future of everything Richard and I had built together. And for the first time in years, I was the one making the decisions. The commercial real estate broker Patricia recommended was nothing like I expected. Vivian Torres wasn't the sleek, aggressive type that dominated the high-end market. In her early 60s, with salt and pepper haircut and a practical bob, she reminded me more of a no-nonsense school principal than a power broker. 28 years in commercial real estate, she said, settling into a chair across from me in the discreet back corner of a cafe far from our office. I've handled messier situations than yours, believe me. I liked her immediately. So, Vivian continued, opening a small notebook. Patricia says you own a prime commercial property that you're considering selling. The twist being that your soon-to-be ex-husband's company occupies it and doesn't realize you control the building. That's the situation in a nutshell. And you're meeting with him tomorrow to discuss terms. I nodded. I need to understand my options, real market value, potential buyers, timeline, everything, not just for leverage in tomorrow's meeting, but because I may actually go through with the sale. Vivian studied me for a moment, then nodded. All right, let's talk numbers. She pulled out a tablet and brought up comparative sales data for similar commercial properties in the area. Based on location, square footage, condition, and current occupancy rates, we're looking at approximately 42 million. The figure shouldn't have surprised me. I knew the real estate market, but hearing it stated so plainly made the reality of my position sink in. I controlled an asset worth over $40 million. That's assuming a traditional listing process, Vivian continued. Given the unusual circumstances, there are other approaches we could consider, such as A private sale to a specific buyer. Quicker, quieter, potentially slightly lower return, but much faster execution. Do you have someone in mind? Vivian smiled slightly. Several someones. Your building would be very attractive to certain investment groups I work with. Fully leased, premium location, excellent condition. I could have offers within days, not months. And the current tenants? Wallace Development and the other companies. Leasing space? That depends on the buyer's intentions. Some would maintain existing lease agreements. Others might have different plans. The implication was clear. If I sold to the wrong buyer, Richard and his company could find themselves without a home base, potentially with little notice. What about RTG Ventures? I asked. I've got a meeting with Robert Martinez tomorrow. Vivian's eyebrows rose slightly. Interesting. RTG has been aggressively expanding. They typically acquire the companies, not just their buildings. Would they pay market value? Possibly more, if they want it badly enough. She closed her tablet. But I should warn you, Emily. Once RTG gets involved, things tend to move very quickly, and not always in ways you can control. After Vivian left with instructions to prepare a formal valuation and discreetly contact potential buyers, I drove home to the house that no longer felt like mine. Richard had texted several times, asking to come by to pick up clothes and work files. I'd responded with a terse message telling him his things would be in boxes on the porch by 7. True to my word, I packed 3 suitcases and 4 banker boxes with his immediate necessities. Professional and efficient, just as I'd been throughout our business relationship. Just as I would be through this dissolution. As I placed the last box on the porch, my phone rang. Michael Chen. Emily, sorry to call so late. Do you have a minute? Of course. Is everything all right? I'm not sure. His voice was low, concerned. There's been a development. Richard called an emergency meeting with the executive team this afternoon. Just the senior VPs, very hush-hush. My pulse quickened. What was discussed? A potential sale of Wallace Development to RTG Ventures. I gripped the phone tighter. He's selling the company? Exploring options, he called it. Said the building situation has created challenging circumstances that might make a strategic acquisition the best path forward. Martinez is coming in tomorrow afternoon. The same meeting Patricia had mentioned, but according to Michael, Richard had arranged it, not me. Did he mention our meeting tomorrow morning? No. Michael hesitated. Emily, there's something else. Jessica Reynolds was in the meeting. As his assistant? No. He introduced her as the new VP of Business Development. It's a position we didn't have yesterday. I closed my eyes, processing this new information. He promoted her. Effective immediately, with a seat on the executive committee. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Richard wasn't just having an affair with Jessica, he was positioning her within the company, creating a place for her that would survive regardless of what happened with our marriage or the building. Thank you for telling me, Michael. This is very helpful information. What are you going to do? I thought about Vivian's valuation of the building, about RTG's interest, about the company Richard and I had built together that he now seemed willing to sell to keep his position and his girlfriend secure. I'm going to make some calls, I said finally, and then I'm going to get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a very busy day. After hanging up, I sat on my porch steps, watching as the security lights came on automatically at dusk. The house Richard and I had bought when Wallace Development landed its first major client, the life we had built that was now unraveling. With startling speed, I scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I hadn't called in years. Caroline Manning, the investment banker who'd helped us secure financing for the warehouse renovation that became our signature building. She'd left the bank years ago to start her own private equity firm. She answered on the third ring. Emily Wallace. It's been ages. Too long, I agreed. Caroline, I have a proposition for you. How would your firm feel about a very interesting Real estate opportunity? With a tight timeline. I'm listening. I outlined the situation, the building, its value, the circumstances. Not all the personal details, but enough for her to understand the urgency. Let me be clear, Caroline said, when I finished. You control an asset worth approximately $40 million that houses a successful real estate development company currently run by your husband, who doesn't realize you never transferred ownership. That's correct. And you're willing to sell it. To us, potentially displacing that company in the process. That depends, I said carefully, on what happens at my meeting tomorrow morning, and on what else I might be selling along with the building. Intriguing. I could hear the smile in her voice. Send me the details tonight. I'll have my team work up some numbers. How soon do you need a response? Tomorrow afternoon. After my meeting with RTG Ventures, cutting it close. Time is a luxury I don't have right now. After we hung up, I sent one more text to Patricia, asking her to prepare additional documents for our meeting with Richard. Then I went inside, poured a glass of wine, and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop. By midnight, I had completed a detailed analysis of Wallace Development's financial position, projections, and vulnerabilities. By 1 a.m., I had drafted 3 different scenarios for tomorrow's negotiation. By 2 a.m., I had emailed everything to Patricia and Caroline. As I finally headed upstairs to bed, I passed the wall of photos chronicling Richard's and my life together. Our wedding, the groundbreaking, for our first major project, the ribbon cutting at our signature building, Richard front and center in every image, me slightly to the side or behind. For 15 years, I had accepted that arrangement. Had told myself it didn't matter who got the credit as long as we succeeded together. Tomorrow that would change. Tomorrow, Richard would discover exactly what happens when the woman he had sidelined professionally and betrayed personally stepped fully into her power. I slept better than I had in months. Patricia Chen's conference room radiated understated power. Walnut table gleaming under recessed lighting, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a strategic view of the courthouse, leather chairs wheeled with perfect precision around the table. I arrived 30 minutes early to review our strategy one final time. Remember, Patricia said, sliding a folder toward me, we're negotiating from a position of strength, but don't show all your cards at once. Let him make the first concrete offer. I nodded, scanning the documents she'd prepared. Property valuation, company financials, preliminary divorce terms. And the RTG meeting this afternoon? Scheduled for 3. Caroline Manning called this morning. Her team worked through the night. They'll have a proposal to us by noon. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Wallace and Mr. Greenfield have arrived, Patricia's assistant announced. Send them in, Patricia replied, her expression shifting subtly to professional neutrality. Richard entered first, immaculate as always in a charcoal suit that complemented his silver-streaked dark hair. David Greenfield, Wallace Developments, longtime legal counsel, followed close behind. I had expected Richard to look haggard, stressed. Instead, he appeared almost relaxed, confident, the expression he wore when approaching a negotiation he expected to win. That confidence faltered briefly when he saw me, seated at the head of the table rather than along the side, dressed in a crimson suit I'd purchased but never worn during our marriage, my posture radiating the same authority I'd used closing multi-million-dollar real estate deals. Emily, he nodded, taking the seat opposite Patricia. I think we can resolve this situation amicably. I certainly hope so, I replied, not bothering with pleasantries. Shall we begin? David Greenfield cleared his throat. Before we start, I've prepared some documents regarding the building ownership situation. There's clearly been a clerical oversight. There's been no oversight, Patricia interrupted smoothly. Wallace Acquisitions LLC is the legal owner of the property at 1800 Market Street. Emily Wallace is the sole member of Wallace Acquisitions LLC. The ownership is clear and properly recorded. The intent was always to transfer the property to Wallace Development, Greenfield countered, pushing a document across the table. We have the draft transfer agreement here, prepared 5 years ago. 5 unsigned, Patricia noted, barely glancing at it. Intent without execution is meaningless in real estate law, as I'm sure you know. Richard leaned forward. Emily, be reasonable. That building is the cornerstone of our company. Your company? Interesting choice of words. I opened my folder. Let's clarify the actual situation. I own the building outright. I co-founded Wallace Development and still own 40% of the company. And I've recently learned that you're exploring selling that company to RTG Ventures. Richard's carefully composed expression faltered. Who told you that? Does it matter? You're meeting with Robert Martinez this afternoon. A meeting you arranged, while canceling tomorrow's board meeting and promoting your girlfriend to VP of Business Development. All without consulting me, your business partner. Jessica's promotion was based on merit, Richard said stiffly, and the RTG discussion is preliminary, simply exploring options given the uncertainty about our headquarters. The uncertainty you created when you decided to sleep with your assistant. Greenfield shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we could focus on constructive solutions rather than personal matters. The personal and professional are inseparable in this case, Patricia interjected. But my client is certainly interested in constructive solutions. Richard, what exactly are you proposing? Richard exchanged glances with Greenfield before responding. A fair division of assets. Emily keeps her 40% ownership of Wallace Development. I retain controlling interest at 60%. The building is transferred to the company as originally intended. In exchange, Emily receives appropriate compensation for the property. Let's say $10 million, paid out over 5 years. I nearly laughed. $10 million? The property is currently valued at approximately $42 million. That valuation is theoretical, Greenfield countered. Based on an open market sale to a third party. This is a transfer to a company you partially own. A company Richard is considering selling to RTG, I reminded them. Which would effectively mean I'd transfer a $42 million asset for $10 million, then watch Richard sell the whole package to RTG for a premium. Richard had the grace to look slightly abashed. The RTG discussions aren't definitive, but they are happening, I pressed. Tell me, what's the preliminary valuation they've discussed? His hesitation told me everything. Let me be clear, I continued. I have no intention of transferring the building to Wallace Development for anything less than full market value. And given your obvious plans to sell to RTG, I'm not interested in maintaining minority ownership in a company where I have no control. What are you suggesting? Richard asked, wariness creeping into his voice. I'm suggesting that we have 3 options. I ticked them off on my fingers. 1, I sell the building on the open market, likely to one of several investment groups. Already expressing interest, Wallace Development either negotiates a lease with the new owners or relocates. Richard's jaw tightened. That would severely impact company operations. 2, I continued as if he hadn't spoken. I sell the building to Wallace Development at full market value, $42 million, not your insulting $10 million offer. And we negotiate a complete separation where you buy out my 40% company, ownership as well. And the third option? Greenfield asked when Richard remained silent. I smiled. The third option is that I leverage my building ownership and 40% company stake to take control of Wallace Development, with Richard exiting the company completely. Richard's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. That's absurd. The board would never support you. Actually, I've had some very interesting conversations with key board members and executives over the past 24 hours. Michael Chen, for instance, was quite concerned about your secretive meeting yesterday, as was Linda in finance and Thomas in operations. Richard's face flushed. This is a hostile takeover attempt. No, I corrected. This is me claiming what I've earned after 15 years of being gradually sidelined in my own company. This is me refusing to be erased from the story of Wallace Development's success any longer. You've always been acknowledged as your supportive wife, as the woman who handles the paperwork while you make the real decisions. Please, Richard. I found every major property we've developed. I structured the financial deals that made those developments possible. I maintained the relationships with banks and investors that kept us afloat during the recession while you were accepting awards for architectural innovation. The room fell silent as the weight of my words sank in. Richard looked genuinely startled, as if hearing this perspective for the first time. "What do you want, Emily?" he finally asked, his voice quieter. "Really?" "I want what I've earned. Recognition, control, the chance to build something on my terms." I closed my folder. "You have until 3 o'clock this afternoon to decide which of the 3 options you prefer. That's when I meet with RTG Ventures." "You're meeting with Martinez, too?" Richard looked stunned. "He reached out to my attorney yesterday. Apparently, he's interested in discussing options directly with the building's owner." I stood, signaling the end of our meeting. 3 o'clock, Richard. After that, I make the decision without your input." As Richard and Greenfield gathered their papers, I remained standing, straight-backed and unwavering. When Richard reached the door, he paused. "I never meant to sideline you, Emily. I thought we were building something together." "We were," I replied, "until you decided you deserved the spotlight while I belonged in the shadows. Until you decided our vows were optional and our building was actually yours." 3 o'clock, Richard. Time's running out. After they left, Patricia turned to me with the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. "That," she said, "was masterful." I sank back into my chair, adrenaline still coursing through me. It was terrifying, but effective. He's rattled. Good. I checked my watch. Now we need to prepare for the RTG meeting, and I need to call Caroline Manning to see what her team has come up with. What do you think Richard will do? I considered the question, recalling the shock on his face when I'd outlined my terms. He'll try to find a 4th option, something that lets him maintain control while appearing to give me what I want. He's always been good at redirecting when he's backed into a corner. And if he can't find that 4th option, then he'll choose whatever protects his ego most effectively. I gathered my things, preparing to leave. Which means I need to be ready for all possible outcomes this afternoon. Just as we reached the door, my phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source. "Jessica Reynolds, we need to talk, urgently. It's about Richard's plans." I showed the message to Patricia, who raised a single eyebrow. "Interesting. The girlfriend reaches out after your show of strength." Should I respond? Patricia considered for a moment. "Information is power. Meet her, but in public. And tell me everything afterward." I texted back. "Coffee shop on 7th, noon." Jessica's reply came immediately. "I'll be there." As I walked to my car, I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. For years, I had allowed Richard to define our business roles, our public image, our shared narrative. Now I was writing my own story, not as Richard Wallace's supportive wife, but as Emily Wallace, businesswoman and force to be reckoned with. And the next chapter was about to begin. Jessica met my gaze directly. Self-preservation. Richard is about to sacrifice me to close this deal. I'm not going down without a fight. What exactly do you want from me? A place in whatever happens next. Her voice hardened. If you're taking control of Wallace Development, I want to keep my position. The real VP role, not Richard's empty title. If you're selling the building, I want a recommendation and severance that reflects my actual contributions. I leaned back, considering her proposition. You have an MBA from Wharton, presumably other options. Why stay with Wallace Development after all this? Because I've put in the work, she replied immediately. For the past 8 months, I've been handling client negotiations, developing financial models, researching potential acquisitions. Richard takes the meetings, but I do the analysis that makes him look good. The familiarity of her situation wasn't lost on me. Another woman doing the substantive work while Richard claimed the credit. History repeating itself. What would you do? Asked, if you were in my position right now? Jessica didn't hesitate. I'd take control of the company. The building gives you leverage, but it's the company that has real long-term value. Richard's been coasting on past innovations for years. The market's shifting, and he's not adapting. That's why RTG wants to acquire us. They see the potential Richard's ignoring. Her assessment aligned with my own analysis of Wallace Development's market position. Richard had been reluctant to pursue the mixed-use developments I'd been advocating for, sticking with the office spaces that had made our reputation despite changing market demands. If you help me, Jessica continued, I can provide everything. You need to counter Richard's narrative with the board and senior leadership. Documentation of my work versus his actual contributions. Evidence of his planned RTG deal. Everything. Why not just take this to Martinez? Expose Richard's deceptions directly to RTG? Because I've assessed all the players and you're the one most likely to succeed. She smiled thinly. I recognize ambition and competence when I see it, Emily. Richard underestimated you. I won't make the same mistake. I considered my options. Jessica was offering valuable ammunition, but trusting Richard's mistress seemed risky at best. Yet, her story rang true. The Richard she described, making grand promises while planning to discard her, matched the man who had gradually erased my contributions while sleeping with his assistant. I'll need proof, I said finally. Not just screenshots, actual documentation I can verify. Jessica reached into her bag and withdrew a thumb drive. Everything's here. Financial models I developed that Richard presented as his work. The complete RTG negotiation history. Recordings of Richard discussing the building situation with Martinez. Recordings? I'm thorough. She slid the drive across the table. Richard may have taught me about architectural design, but I learned about documentation and leverage all on my own. As I pocketed the drive, my phone buzzed with a text from Caroline Manning. Proposal ready. $45 for the building. Additional terms for discussion regarding company acquisition. Available to meet before your RTG appointment. Jessica caught my expression. Good news? Potentially. I stood, gathering my things. I'll review what you've provided. If it checks out, we can discuss your future role. But understand this. I don't operate like Richard. I expect loyalty, transparency, and results. Understood. She remained seated, as I prepared to leave. One more thing you should know. Richard's meeting with the executive team right now. Damage control after word of your building ownership leaked. He's painting you as emotionally unstable, making irrational demands because of our relationship. Of course he is. I felt a surge of cold anger. Anything else? Just this. She met my gaze directly. For what it's worth, he talked about you constantly, even while we were together, about how brilliant you were with numbers, how you could sense which properties would succeed when no one else could see it. He admired you, Emily. He just couldn't stand being overshadowed by you. The revelation should have hurt. Instead, it simply confirmed what I had gradually come to understand over the past 2 days. Richard hadn't betrayed me because I was lacking in some way. He had betrayed me because my strengths threatened his carefully constructed self-image. Thank you for the information, Jessica. I'll be in touch. As I walked out of the coffee shop, my phone rang. Michael Chen. Emily, where are you? You need to get to the office right away. What's happened? Richard just announced an emergency board meeting for 2 o'clock to vote on the RTG acquisition. Offer. He's claiming it's the only way to save the company given the uncertainty about our headquarters. He can't do that, I said, quickening my pace toward my car. Any acquisition requires shareholder approval. I own 40%. He's saying the bylaws allow the board to approve entering formal negotiations without shareholder vote. It's a technicality, but it would create momentum toward a sale. I reached my car, mind racing. Who's supporting him on the board? It's split. Lawrence and Peterson are firmly in Richard's camp. Zhang and I are opposed. Williams and Rodriguez are on the fence. 6 board members, evenly divided. Where's the meeting? Main conference room, 2 o'clock sharp. I checked my watch, 12:45. I'll be there. And Michael, tell everyone to hold off any decisions until I arrive. I have information they need to hear before any vote happens. After hanging up, I immediately called Patricia. Richard's trying to force a board vote on the RTG deal at 2. I need you to meet me at the Wallace Development offices as soon as possible. And contact Caroline Manning. Tell her to bring her proposal to the board meeting instead of our private discussion. Emily, Patricia cautioned, rushing into a confrontation might not be the best approach. This isn't a rush, it's a response. Richard's accelerating his timeline because he knows I have leverage. I need to use it before he convinces the board to move forward with RTG. I ended the call and started my car, mind already formulating a strategy. Richard thought he could outmaneuver me by convening the board while I was meeting with Jessica, a meeting he likely knew about, given her access to his emails. Instead, he had given me the perfect forum to present my case. Not just to him, but to the entire leadership of Wallace Development. The company gala was scheduled for Friday night. Richard had suggested I wear my blue dress, the conservative one that complemented his favorite suit without drawing attention away from him. The dutiful wife in appropriate background attire. Instead, I would be attending that gala in a very different capacity. Either as the new controlling owner of Wallace Development or as the woman who had sold the company's headquarters out from under them. Either way, Richard's days of dictating my role were over. Wallace Development's headquarters hummed with unusual tension as I strode through the main entrance at 1:45. Employees watched with poorly concealed curiosity as I made my way to the elevator, Patricia Chen and Caroline Manning flanking me like generals accompanying their commander into battle. "Remember," Patricia murmured as the elevator climbed toward the executive floor, "you have multiple strong positions. The building ownership is legally unassailable. Your 40% stake gives you significant leverage over any company decisions. And with the information Jessica provided, I'll have the board eating out of my hand," I finished, adjusting the collar of my crimson suit jacket. Richard taught me well how to command a room. When the elevator doors opened, Jessica was waiting, composed, professional, betraying no hint of our earlier meeting. "Mrs. Wallace," she nodded formally. "The board is assembling in the main conference room. Mr. Wallace asked me to escort you when you arrived." "How thoughtful," I replied, matching her professional tone. "Please lead the way." As we walked, Jessica murmured quietly, "Richard's been calling board members individually all morning. Lawrence and Peterson arrived an hour ago for private meetings." "Thank you." I paused outside the conference room doors, gathering myself for what would likely be the most important presentation of my career. "Let's proceed." When I entered, all conversation ceased. The boardroom, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city Richard and I had helped shape, had been the stage for countless Wallace Development triumphs. Today, it would witness its most significant power shift. Richard sat at the head of the table, the position he had always occupied. His expression flickered between surprise and annoyance at my arrival with reinforcements. "Emily." He nodded stiffly. "This is a closed board meeting. I'm afraid your guests will need to wait outside." "Actually," I replied smoothly, "Patricia, Chen is my legal counsel. and given that we're discussing a potential company acquisition that affects my 40% ownership stake, I have every right to legal representation here." "And the other woman?" Richard asked, eyeing Caroline with undisguised suspicion. "Caroline Manning, of Manning Capital Partners," I introduced her. "She has a proposal relevant to today's discussion." Board member Lawrence frowned. "Richard, you said this meeting was specifically about the RTG Ventures offer." "It is," Richard confirmed quickly. "Emily is attempting to derail the proceedings with alternatives that haven't been properly vetted." "Actually," I interjected, placing my portfolio on the table, "I'm ensuring the board has complete information before making decisions that affect the future of Wallace Development, including information some parties might prefer to keep hidden." I looked meaningfully around the table at each board member. Michael Chen nodded slightly in encouragement. Lawrence and Peterson exchanged uncertain glances. Williams and Rodriguez watched with wary interest. "Before we begin," I continued, "I believe proper procedure requires that as a 40% shareholder, I should be formally recognized as having a right to address this board." Lawrence cleared his throat. "She's correct, Richard. Let's hear what Emily has to say." Richard's jaw tightened, but he gestured for me to proceed. I remained standing, deliberately positioning myself at the opposite end of the table from Richard, a visual challenge to his authority. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I've recently become aware that Richard has been engaged in advanced negotiations to sell Wallace Development to RTG Ventures without proper disclosure to all shareholders, specifically to me. I've also confirmed that he's been misrepresenting the status of our headquarters building, which, as you may have heard, is legally owned not by Wallace Development, but by Wallace Acquisitions LLC, a separate entity that I control." Richard leaned forward. "As I've explained to the board, that ownership situation was a clerical oversight that—" "There was no oversight," I cut in firmly. "The building was deliberately maintained under separate ownership for specific tax advantages." Richard was fully aware of this arrangement, as documented in our annual corporate filings and tax returns for the past 8 years. I gestured to Patricia, who distributed folders to each board member. "You'll find the relevant documentation in Section 1, including Richard's signed acknowledgments of the ownership structure from 2016, 2018, and 2021. The room fell silent as board members flipped through the evidence. Richard's face flushed deep red. "Emily is technically correct about the building ownership," he conceded, attempting to regain control. "Which is precisely why the RTG offer represents our best path forward. The current situation creates instability that you created," I finished for him. "Let's be transparent with the board about the complete situation, Richard. Your affair with Jessica Reynolds, your unilateral decision to promote her to a vice presidency that didn't previously exist, and your secret negotiations with RTG that would benefit you personally while leaving many of our employees without positions in the combined entity. That's speculation," Richard snapped. "Actually, it's documented fact." I nodded to Patricia again, who distributed a second set of materials. Section 2 contains Richard's complete email correspondence with Robert Martinez regarding the acquisition, including specific discussion of management restructuring that would eliminate numerous positions currently held by Wallace Development employees. Michael Chen looked up sharply. "Is this accurate, Richard? You've been discussing staff reductions with RTG?" Before Richard could respond, I continued. Section 3 contains the financial models Jessica Reynolds prepared for the RTG negotiations. Models showing that while the $85 million valuation appears attractive on the surface, the actual terms would leave Wallace Development shareholders with substantially less, after accounting for debt assumption and earnout provisions. Jessica, standing quietly against the wall, kept her expression professionally neutral as all eyes briefly turned to her. "This is absurd," Richard sputtered. "You're presenting partial information taken out of context." "I need to emphasize," Caroline added, "that our offer is time-sensitive. We're prepared to move forward immediately, but if the board chooses to pursue other options, we'll need to withdraw by close of business today. Rodriguez leaned forward. We would need to review the complete terms. Of course, Caroline replied, gesturing to the folders. The full proposal is included in your materials. We're prepared to answer any questions now or in a follow-up session this afternoon. Chen turned to me. And your role in this scenario would be CEO? Yes. With a management team largely drawn from current Wallace development executives, with some adjustments. My gaze flickered briefly to Jessica, then back to the board. The Manning Capital proposal includes retention bonuses for key personnel and a commitment to preserving the Wallace development brand and legacy. Williams studied the proposal thoughtfully. This is comprehensive. I've had limited time to prepare, I acknowledged. But I've been thinking about Wallace Development's future for years. The difference is that now I'm in a position to implement that vision directly rather than having it filtered through Richard's priorities. Lawrence cleared his throat. Richard, do you have a response to this proposal? All eyes turned to my husband, who sat rigid with barely contained fury. When he spoke, his voice was tight with control. Emily has orchestrated this situation perfectly. I'll give her that. She's leveraged a technical ownership issue into a power play for control of the company. His gaze met mine across the table. But remember who built Wallace Development into what it is today? Who designed the buildings that made our reputation? Who brought in the clients and investors that fueled our growth? We built it together, I corrected quietly. My property acquisitions, your designs, our shared vision. Until you decided I belonged in the background while you took center stage. Until you began sleeping with your assistant while dismissing my business insights. Richard flinched visibly. Some of the board members looked uncomfortable at the personal turn of the conversation, but I pressed on. This isn't about our marriage, Richard. It's about recognizing that Wallace Development needs new leadership to move forward in a changing market. Your focus on traditional office developments when the industry is shifting toward mixed-use projects has left us vulnerable. That's why RTG sees us as an acquisition target rather than a competitor. Peterson, who had always been Richard's strongest ally on the board, reluctantly nodded. She's not wrong about the market trends. We've been discussing this in the development committee for over a year. With all due respect, Richard countered, I've been in this industry for decades. These market shifts are cyclical. Our core business model remains sound. The financials suggest otherwise, Caroline interjected smoothly, directing the board to specific pages in her presentation. Revenue from traditional office developments has declined 15% over the past 3 years, while competitors focusing on mixed-use projects have seen growth averaging 22% in the same period. As the board members reviewed the data, I could see the momentum shifting. Richard sensed it too, his expression darkening. This is still my company, he declared, a note of desperation entering his voice. I hold 60% ownership. And I own the building we're sitting in, I reminded him, without which your 60% becomes significantly less valuable. Chen looked between us, then addressed the room. I think we need some time to review these materials and consider our options. Perhaps Richard and Emily could give the board some privacy to discuss? Lawrence nodded. Agreed. And we should invite Robert Martinez to present RTG's proposal directly given these new revelations. Martinez is already on his way for our 3 o'clock meeting, Richard confirmed stiffly. Good, Williams said. We'll hear both proposals and make an informed decision. Richard, Emily, if you could excuse us? As we filed out of the boardroom, the tension between Richard and me was palpable. In the hallway, he grabbed my arm, pulling me toward his office. A word, privately. Patricia started to object, but I shook my head slightly. It's fine. I'll meet you and Caroline in the lobby. In 15 minutes. Once inside his office, The corner suite with its commanding views and design awards lining the walls. Richard closed the door and turned to me, his composure finally cracking. "What the hell are you doing, Emily? Trying to destroy everything we've built?" "I'm trying to save it," I replied calmly. "From your ego, from your short-sightedness, from your betrayal. This is about Jessica, isn't it? You're punishing me for one mistake." "This isn't about Jessica," I cut him off. "It's about years of being gradually sidelined in my own company. It's about watching you take credit for my work, dismiss my ideas, and treat me as an accessory, rather than a partner. The affair was just the final confirmation of how little you respected me." Richard ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. "That's not true. I've always valued your contributions. Valued them, perhaps, but never acknowledged them. Never shared the spotlight." I moved toward the windows, gazing out at the city we had helped shape. "When was the last time you publicly credited me for finding a property or structuring a deal? When did you last introduce me as your business partner rather than your wife at a company event?" His silence was answer. "Enough. I want to know one thing, Richard. Just one thing." I turned back to face him. "When did it change? When did you stop seeing me as your equal and start seeing me as someone to be managed and contained?" He looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "I never—" "You did. Maybe so gradually you didn't notice. But somewhere along the way, your success became the priority, and my role became supporting that success rather than achieving my own." Richard sank into his chair, the fight seeming to drain out of him. "What do you want, Emily? Really?" I told the board exactly what I want: control of Wallace Development and the chance to lead it in the direction I believe is necessary for its future success. "And if I fight you on this? Use my majority ownership to block your plans? Then I'll sell the building to the highest bidder and watch you try to salvage what's left of the company when you have to relocate within 6 months." I kept my voice level. "But you won't do that, Richard, because deep down, you know I'm right about the business. You know the mixed-use developments I've been pushing for represent the future. You've just been too proud to admit it." He was silent for a long moment, studying me as if seeing me for the first time in years. "You've changed." "No," I corrected. "I've stopped accepting less than I deserve. There's a difference." Richard's phone buzzed. A text message. He glanced at it, then back at me. "Martinez is here. The board wants us both back in the meeting." As we walked toward the boardroom, Richard paused. "For what it's worth, I never meant for things to turn out this way. With us, with the company, "No," I said, and meant it. "But they did. And now we both have to live with the consequences." The next 2 hours were a masterclass in corporate negotiation. Robert Martinez presented RTG's acquisition offer with polished confidence, only occasionally, betraying his surprise at my presence and active participation. I countered with pointed questions about employee retention and strategic direction that clearly hadn't been part of his prepared remarks. Caroline Manning delivered a comprehensive overview of her firm's proposal, emphasizing the stability it offered compared to RTG's more disruptive approach. The board members engaged deeply, pressing both sides on valuation methods, integration plans, and leadership structures. Throughout it all, Richard remained largely silent, his earlier fire replaced by a calculating watchfulness. He was reassessing, recalibrating, something I had seen him do countless times in business negotiations when he realized his initial position was untenable. By 5 o'clock, the board had asked all parties to leave while they deliberated. As we waited in separate conference rooms, Richard with Martinez, me with Caroline and Patricia, the weight of the day's events began to settle on me. Whatever happened next, Wallace Development would never be the same. Neither would I. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael Chen. "Board reaching decision. You should prepare for both outcomes." I took a deep breath, smoothing my crimson suit jacket. "Time to face the music," I told Patricia and Caroline. "Whatever the board decides, I want to thank you both for your support today." Patricia squeezed my hand briefly. "You did this, Emily. We just provided the tools." At 5:30 precisely, Jessica appeared at our conference room door. "The board is ready to see you now, all parties together." As we walked back to the boardroom, I caught sight of Richard and Martinez approaching from the opposite direction. Richard's expression was unreadable, but there was a tenseness in his shoulders that I recognized from 20 years of working together. Lawrence, as the senior board member, stood as we all took our seats. After careful consideration of both proposals and extensive discussion, the board has reached a decision regarding the future of Wallace Development. I kept my expression neutral, hands folded calmly on the table, though my heart raced. We believe that the Manning Capital Partners proposal, with Emily Wallace assuming the role of CEO, represents the most stable and promising path forward for the company. The words hung in the air for a moment before their full impact registered. I had won. The company was mine. Martinez's face darkened with barely suppressed anger. Richard simply looked defeated, as if he had expected this outcome despite hoping for another. Lawrence continued, outlining the board's conditions. A fair valuation for Richard's 60% stake, preservation of the Wallace name, retention, packages for key employees, and formal transfer of the building to company ownership as part of the restructuring. Provided these terms are acceptable to all parties, he concluded, we believe this represents the best outcome for shareholders, employees, and the company's long-term prospects. Caroline nodded professionally. Manning Capital finds these conditions acceptable in principle, subject to final documentation. All eyes turned to me. I accept the board's decision and conditions, I said simply. And I thank you for your confidence in my leadership. Finally, everyone looked to Richard. The room fell silent, waiting for his response. After what felt like an eternity, he spoke. I'll need to review the full terms with my attorney, but I won't stand in the way of what the board believes is best for Wallace Development. Relief washed through me, though I was careful not to show it. After 15 years of partnership and 2 days of intense conflict, Richard was conceding with something approaching grace. As the meeting concluded with handshakes and agreements, to formalize the details, I found myself standing face to face with Richard in the room that had witnessed both our greatest triumphs and now, the end of our professional relationship. "Congratulations, CEO Wallace," he said, a complex mix of emotions behind his eyes. "The company is yours." "Thank you," I replied quietly. "I'll take good care of it." He nodded once, then turned and walked away, Martinez following close behind. I watched him go, feeling not triumph but a peculiar sense of completion. One chapter ending, another beginning. Chen approached, offering a genuine smile. "So, what's your first act as CEO going to be?" I glanced around the boardroom, at the people who had just entrusted me with the company's future, at the city visible through the windows, at the building that had launched our success and now secured my control. "First," I said with quiet confidence, "we're going to finish what Richard and I started all those years ago, but this time on my terms." The company gala was scheduled for Friday night, just 2 days after the board made its momentous decision. Under normal circumstances, I might have suggested postponing the event given the dramatic leadership changes underway. But these weren't normal circumstances, and I had no intention of hiding from the public stage Richard had dominated for so long. "Are you sure about this?" Patricia asked as we finalized the transition documents in my new office, Richard's former corner suite, which I'd moved into the morning after the board meeting. "The gala will be awkward, to say the least." "It's the perfect opportunity," I countered, signing the last of the preliminary agreements. "All our major clients, investors, and employees in one room. I can address the changes directly, control the narrative, and set the tone for Wallace Development's future." And Richard? His choice whether to attend or not. The invitation stands. The transition was moving with surprising speed. Manning Capital's team had worked through the night to finalize the investment terms. The board had expedited approval of the leadership change. And Richard, after his initial defeat, seemed almost relieved to let go, as if 15 years of maintaining his position at the top had exhausted him more than he'd realized. We had agreed to a clean separation. Richard would receive $50 million for his 60% stake, slightly less than RTG's offer, but with fewer contingencies and immediate payment. He would retain his architectural license and the right to start a new firm after a 1-year non-compete period. Most importantly, he would make no claims on the building or attempt to challenge the board's decision. In return, I guaranteed that the company would continue to bear the Wallace name and that Richard's design contributions would be acknowledged in company materials. Professional courtesy, nothing more. By Thursday afternoon, word had spread throughout the industry about the leadership change at Wallace Development. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from clients, competitors, and former colleagues, some congratulatory, others thinly disguised attempts to assess whether our existing contracts would remain secure. "Emily Wallace," I answered without checking the caller ID, juggling documents while Michael Chen waited patiently across the desk. So it's true. A woman's voice, vaguely familiar. "You've pulled off the corporate coup of the year," I signaled to Michael that I needed a moment. "Who is this?" "Sarah Jenkins, Portland Urban Development. We met at the Governor's Economic Summit last year. I placed her immediately, head of one of the largest development firms in Portland, a potential competitor but also a possible ally for regional projects." "Sarah. Yes, there have been some changes at Wallace Development." "Changes?" She laughed. "That's one way to put it. Word is you outmaneuvered both your cheating husband and RTG Ventures in a single day. I'm impressed." "I appreciate the call, but if you're looking for gossip—" "I'm looking to talk business," she interrupted. "That mixed-use concept you pitched at the summit, the one combining residential, commercial, and civic spaces with integrated green infrastructure. Richard dismissed it publicly as impractical idealism, if I recall correctly." The memory stung. Even now. Richard had undermined my presentation, suggesting that while the concept was visionary, it lacked practical application in current markets. "I remember," I said carefully. "I have a site that would be perfect for exactly that concept. 50 acres along the riverfront in Portland. The city is backing sustainable development initiatives with tax incentives. If you're serious about taking Wallace Development in a new direction, I'd like to discuss a joint venture." I found myself smiling. "I'm very serious, Sarah, and very interested in that conversation." "Excellent. I'll have my team send over the preliminary site analysis." "And Emily? I'm attending your gala tomorrow night. Looking forward to seeing the new boss in action." After we hung up, I turned back to Michael, energized by the call. "We may have our first major project under the new leadership." "Portland Riverfront?" he guessed, having overheard my side of the conversation. "Sarah's been assembling that parcel for years. It's prime real estate. And perfect for the mixed-use development approach I've been advocating." I returned to the transition documents we'd been reviewing. "Speaking of which, how's the team responding to the reorganization plans?" Michael's expression turned thoughtful. "Mostly positive. Development and operations are on board. They've seen the market shifts you've been talking about. Design is more divided. Some of Richard's loyalists are uncertain about the new direction." "And Jessica Reynolds? How's the team responding to her maintaining the VP position?" "Mixed reactions. Her abilities aren't in question. She's clearly qualified. But the circumstances?" I nodded, understanding the complex optics. Keeping Richard's mistress in a leadership role might seem strange from the outside, but Jessica's insights and documentation had been instrumental in my takeover. More importantly, Her financial models for the mixed-use developments aligned perfectly with my vision for the company's future. "She stays," I said firmly, "but with clear expectations and a restructured role focusing on financial strategy rather than client relations. And Michael? I want you as COO, effective immediately." His surprise was evident. "I'm honored, but you sure you want to make that announcement at the gala? It might seem like you're rewarding those who sided with you against Richard." "I'm rewarding competence and shared vision," I corrected. "The company is changing direction. I need leaders who believe in that new direction." Our meeting continued for another hour as we finalized the organizational changes to be announced at the gala. By the time Michael left, early evening shadows were stretching across the city skyline, visible from my new office windows. I found myself alone for the first time all day, the enormity of what I'd accomplished finally sinking in. CEO of Wallace. Development. Controlling owner of the company I'd helped build, but never fully led. It was everything I'd secretly wanted, but never believed I could have while married to Richard. My phone buzzed with a text. "The movers finished at the house. Keys are with the security guard downstairs if you want to go home tonight. Richard, characteristically efficient even in dissolution." Home. The word felt hollow now. The house we'd shared for 10 years had been part of the separation agreement. I would keep it, along with most of the furnishings. Richard had moved into a downtown apartment while he finalized plans to relocate to Chicago, where he had apparently accepted a position with an architectural firm. I gathered my things and headed to the elevator, nodding to the few employees still working late. Tomorrow would be my first official day as CEO. Tomorrow night, I would present the new Wallace development to the world. But tonight, I needed to reacquaint myself with the house that was now mine alone. The security guard handed me the keys, with a sympathetic smile. "Have a good evening, Mrs. Wallace." "Ms." I corrected gently. "Emily is fine." The drive home felt surreal. Same route, same traffic, completely different circumstances. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked unchanged from the outside. Inside was another story. Richard's presence had been surgically removed. His books, his awards, his clothing, all gone. The spaces where his things had been felt conspicuously empty, like missing teeth in an otherwise intact smile. I wandered from room to room, cataloging the absences, adjusting to the new reality. In my bedroom, I found a single envelope propped against the lamp on what had been his nightstand. My name in Richard's precise architect's handwriting. Sat on the edge of the bed, turning the envelope over in my hands, suddenly uncertain whether I wanted to read whatever message he had left. After everything that had happened, what could he possibly say that would matter? Curiosity won out. Inside was a single page of Richard's personal stationery. "Emily, by the time you read this, the legal documents will be signed and our professional separation complete. Our personal divorce will take longer, but I won't contest your terms there either. I won't offer excuses for my actions. They were unworthy of our history together, both personal and professional. What began as admiration for your abilities somehow transformed into competition, then resentment, as your instincts repeatedly proved more accurate than mine. You were right about the mixed-use developments. You were right about the changing market. You were right that I gradually pushed you into the background while taking credit for our shared success. I couldn't admit these truths, even to myself, until forced to confront them in that boardroom. The company will thrive under your leadership. It probably should have been yours years ago. For whatever it's worth after everything I've done, I am sorry. Richard. I refolded the letter and returned it to the envelope. Emotions too complicated to easily name washing through me. Not forgiveness. It was far too soon for that, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Richard had betrayed me, yes. Diminished me professionally, yes. But in the end, he had acknowledged my victory with a grace I hadn't expected. My phone buzzed with an incoming email. Jessica Reynolds, sending the final draft of my speech for tomorrow night's gala. The subject line read simply, "Ready when you are." I smiled at the aptness of those words. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I was ready. Not just for a speech or a gala, but for the chance to build something on my own terms, to create the future I had envisioned but never been allowed to pursue. Tomorrow night, Wallace. Development would begin its new chapter, and so would I. The Grand Hyatt ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the subtle wealth of Seattle's business elite. Black tie attendees moved in practiced social patterns. Air kisses, firm handshakes, the quiet exchange of business cards and promises to connect next week. A chamber quartet played in the corner, providing sophisticated background music that no one quite listened to. I stood just outside the main entrance, taking a final moment to compose myself. The blue dress Richard had suggested, conservative, appropriate background attire, hung untouched in my closet. Instead, I wore a tailored black suit with a single architectural element, a dramatic asymmetrical collar in vibrant emerald that drew the eye immediately. Power dressing, not for men's approval but for my own confidence. Ready? Michael Chen appeared at my side, looking sharp in his tuxedo. As I'll ever be. I smoothed my jacket one last time. Has Richard arrived? Not yet. The rumor is he might skip it entirely. I nodded, unsurprised but slightly disappointed. Part of me had hoped he would face this transition directly, acknowledging the company's new direction in person. The other part was relieved at the prospect of navigating the evening without that particular complication. "Let's do this," I said, straightening my shoulders. The reaction as we entered was immediate and electric. Conversations paused mid-sentence, heads turned, eyes widened in recognition, both of me and of what my presence as the central figure, rather than Richard's +1, represented. Within moments, I was surrounded. Board members offering congratulations, clients expressing support tinged with curiosity, employees watching carefully for signals about their future under new leadership. Emily, stunning entrance. Sarah Jenkins from Portland Urban Development approached, champagne flute in hand. The whole room's buzzing about the changes. Half of them don't know whether to congratulate you or offer condolences. I laughed, genuinely amused by her directness. What do you think they should do? Toast your success, obviously. She clinked her glass against mine. I've already heard from 3 people asking if I knew about your takeover in advance. Apparently, my timing in approaching you about the Portland project seems suspiciously perfect. Good business is about recognizing opportunities quickly, I replied. Speaking of which, I reviewed the site plans your team sent over. I'd like to schedule a visit next week. Excellent. We can... Sarah's eyes suddenly fixed on something over my shoulder, her expression sharpening with interest. Well, he showed up after all. I turned to see Richard entering the ballroom, impeccable in his tuxedo, Jessica Reynolds at his side. Not as his date. They maintained a careful professional distance, but clearly arriving together. A strategic choice, I realized. By appearing with Jessica openly but appropriately, he was attempting to take control of the narrative, to normalize what had been a scandal into a simple professional transition. The room's reaction was fascinating to observe. Awkward glances, whispered comments behind hands, subtle repositioning as people tried to gauge which camp they should align with. Interesting play, Sarah murmured. Coming together but not together, acknowledging the connection without flaunting. Free Richard, I agreed, always managing perceptions. For a moment, Richard's eyes met mine across the room. Something passed between us, recognition perhaps of the chess game we were both playing. He gave a slight nod, which I returned. Then he moved toward a group of architectural clients, expertly inserting himself into their conversation as if nothing had changed. Jessica separated from him, making her way to where several Wallace Development executives stood. Her position was precarious. The former assistant who had slept with the boss, now a vice president reporting to the boss's ex-wife. Yet she navigated the room with remarkable poise, neither apologetic nor overly familiar. Ms. Wallace. The event coordinator appeared at my elbow. We're ready for the formal remarks whenever you are. Traditionally, Mr. Wallace would speak at 8:30. I'll speak at 8:30, I confirmed. Please make the announcement. As I continued circulating, I was struck by how differently people interacted with me now. Gone was the vague politeness, the forgettable small talk reserved for Richard's wife. Instead, clients discussed project details directly. Investors asked pointed questions about future strategy. I was finally visible in my own company. At precisely 8:30, the coordinator tapped a microphone, calling for attention. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the CEO of Wallace Development, Emily Wallace. The room quieted as I took my place at the podium. From this vantage point, I could see everyone clearly, the curious, the supportive, the skeptical. Richard stood near the back, arms crossed, expression carefully neutral. Jessica had positioned herself among the management team, professional and attentive. Thank you all for being here tonight, I began, my voice steady and clear. As most of you have heard, Wallace Development is undergoing some significant changes. I'm honored to address you as the company's new CEO and controlling shareholder. Following Manning Capital Partners' investment in our future, I paused, allowing the formal confirmation of the rumors to settle. For 15 years, Wallace Development has been known for innovative design and strategic vision in commercial real estate. That foundation remains strong. But markets evolve, client needs change, and successful companies must adapt accordingly. Nods of agreement from the business veterans in the crowd. Under my leadership, Wallace Development will be expanding into mixed-use developments that integrate residential, commercial, and public spaces with sustainable infrastructure. We're already in discussions regarding a major riverfront project in Portland that will showcase this new direction. Sarah raised her glass in acknowledgement, drawing curious glances. Change can be challenging, but it also brings opportunity. To that end, I'm pleased to announce several organizational updates that will support our evolving focus. I proceeded to announce Michael's promotion to COO, Jessica's refocused role as VP of Financial Strategy, and several other key appointments that signaled the company's new priorities. With each name, I could see alliances solidifying, uncertainty resolving into clear understanding of the new power structure. None of these changes diminish what Wallace Development has accomplished over the past 15 years, I continued, my tone shifting slightly. The vision and architectural innovation that Richard Wallace brought to this company created a strong foundation for our future growth. I looked directly at Richard as I said this, offering the professional acknowledgement I had promised. His expression remained impassive, but he inclined his head slightly in recognition. Real estate development is about seeing potential where others see only what exists today. It's about transformation, taking something with good bones and making it exceptional. I smiled, allowing a touch of personal sentiment to enter my voice. Sometimes that principle applies to companies as well as buildings. Light laughter rippled through the room. I invite all of you, clients, partners, employees, to join us in this next phase of Wallace Development's evolution. The project models and preliminary designs for our new direction are displayed in the adjoining room. My leadership team and I look forward to discussing them with you throughout the evening. I raised my champagne glass. To transformation. To potential realized. To Wallace Development's future. The crowd echoed the toast, the atmosphere shifting from uncertain to energized. As I stepped away from the podium, people immediately moved toward the displays, eager to see the new vision I had outlined. For the next hour, I moved through the crowd with purpose, addressing questions, outlining plans, connecting key stakeholders with project leaders. The response was overwhelmingly positive, particularly from younger clients and those with sustainability mandates who saw in our new direction alignment with their own corporate values. I was deep in conversation with a potential investor when I sensed Richard's presence beside me. "Emily," he said, his tone professionally cordial. "Could I have a word?" I excused myself from the conversation and followed him to a quieter corner of the ballroom. "That was quite a speech," he said once we were relatively private. "You've clearly been planning this direction change for some time." "Years," I confirmed. "Since you dismissed the mixed-use concept at the Economic Summit, to be precise." He winced slightly. "I deserved that. But I meant what I said in my letter, Emily. You were right about the market trends." "Yes, I was." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared history and separate futures hovering between us. "Chicago?" I asked finally. "Next week, Sorensen and Partners offered me a design director position. No ownership stake, no management responsibilities, just architecture. That suits you." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "It does, actually. I've realized I never particularly enjoyed running a company. I just couldn't bear the thought of ceding control." "Especially to me?" I couldn't help asking. Richard met my gaze directly. "Especially to you, because it would have meant acknowledging that you might be better at it than I was." The honesty was unexpected. "And now?" "Now it's undeniable." He glanced around the room, at the enthusiasm surrounding our new project displays, at the energy that hadn't been present at Wallace Development events in years. "You've been CEO for 2 days, and already the company feels transformed." Before I could respond, Jessica approached, professional and poised. "Excuse me, Emily. The Portland City Commissioner is here and very interested in discussing potential expansion of the Riverfront project to include affordable housing elements." "Thank you, Jessica. I'll be right over." I turned back to Richard. "If you'll excuse me?" He nodded, understanding the dismissal. "Of course. Good luck, Emily, with everything." As I walked away, I heard him add quietly, "You won't need it, though." The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of productive conversations and promising connections. By the time the last guest departed, Wallace Development had secured 2 new project commitments and preliminary interest in 3 more. The new direction was resonating strongly with the market. "Successful night," Michael observed as we watched the cleanup crew begin dismantling the displays. "Very successful." "Just the beginning," I replied, scrolling through the business cards I'd collected. "We have follow-up meetings to schedule, proposals to develop, a new company image to solidify, and a gala to plan for next year," he added. "When Wallace Development will be celebrating its most profitable year yet, under its new leadership." I smiled at his confidence. "From your lips to the market's ears, COO Chen." As we walked toward the exit, I noticed Jessica gathering her things, her expression thoughtful as she surveyed the now empty ballroom. "Jessica," I called. "A moment?" She approached immediately, professional and attentive. "Yes?" "You handled tonight beautifully. Navigating these waters couldn't have been easy." Surprise flickered across her face at the unexpected acknowledgement. "Thank you. I was uncertain how to approach the evening." "With exactly the professionalism you demonstrated." I studied her carefully. "Your position at Wallace Development is secure based on your abilities, not your past relationship with Richard. But that relationship is over, correct?" "Completely," she confirmed without hesitation. "It was a mistake I won't repeat." "Good. Because while I value your financial expertise, I need absolute loyalty from my executive team. No divided allegiances." "Understood." She met my gaze directly. "My commitment is to Wallace Development and its future success, under your leadership." I nodded, satisfied with both her words and the conviction behind them. The Portland project is your priority starting Monday. I want your financial models for the affordable housing component by Wednesday. I'll have them on your desk Tuesday afternoon, she promised. As Jessica walked away, Michael raised an eyebrow. Sure about that one? As sure as I can be about anyone, I replied. She's ambitious, talented, and now fully aware of where the real power lies. That's a combination I can work with. Outside, my driver was waiting with the car. The night air was crisp, hinting at the autumn to come. I looked. Back at the hotel, at the banner still hanging above the entrance, Wallace Development Annual Gala. Next year, that banner would look the same. The company name remained unchanged, a condition of my agreement with Richard, but everything else, the leadership, the direction, the energy, that was all different now. All mine. Home, Miss Wallace? My driver asked as I settled into the back seat. Yes, I replied, feeling the truth of the word in a way I hadn't for years. Home. The Grand Hyatt ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the subtle wealth of Seattle's business elite. Black tie attendees moved in practiced social patterns. Air kisses, firm handshakes, the quiet exchange of business cards and promises to connect next week. A chamber quartet played in the corner, providing sophisticated background music that no one quite listened to. I stood just outside the main entrance, taking a final moment to compose myself. The blue dress Richard had suggested, conservative, appropriate background attire, hung untouched in my closet. Instead, I wore a tailored black suit with a single architectural element, a dramatic asymmetrical collar in vibrant emerald that drew the eye immediately. Power dressing, not for men's approval but for my own confidence. Ready? Michael Chen appeared at my side, looking sharp in his tuxedo. As I'll ever be. I smoothed my jacket one last time. Has Richard arrived? Not yet. The rumor is he might skip it entirely. I nodded, unsurprised but slightly disappointed. Part of me had hoped he would face this transition directly, acknowledging the company's new direction in person. The other part was relieved at the prospect of navigating the evening without that particular complication. Let's do this, I said, straightening my shoulders. The reaction as we entered was immediate and electric. Conversations paused mid-sentence, heads turned, eyes widened in recognition, both of me and of what my presence as the central figure, rather than Richard's +1, represented. Within moments, I was surrounded. Board members offering congratulations, clients expressing support tinged with curiosity, employees watching carefully for signals about their future under new leadership. Emily, stunning entrance. Sarah Jenkins from Portland Urban Development, approached, champagne flute in hand. The whole room's buzzing about the changes. Half of them don't know whether to congratulate you or offer condolences. I laughed, genuinely amused by her directness. What do you think they should do? Toast your success, obviously. She clinked her glass against mine. I've already heard from 3 people asking if I knew about your takeover in advance. Apparently, my timing in approaching you about the Portland project seems suspiciously perfect. Good business is about recognizing opportunities quickly, I replied. Speaking of which, I reviewed the site plans your team sent over. I'd like to schedule a visit next week. Excellent. We can... Sarah's eyes suddenly fixed on something over my shoulder, her expression sharpening with interest. Well, he showed up after all. I turned to see Richard entering the ballroom, impeccable in his tuxedo, Jessica Reynolds at his side. Not as his date. They maintained a careful professional distance, but clearly arriving together. A strategic choice, I realized. By appearing with Jessica openly but appropriately, he was attempting to take control of the narrative, to normalize what had been a scandal into a simple professional transition. The room's reaction was fascinating to observe. Awkward glances, whispered comments behind hands, subtle repositioning as people tried to gauge which camp they should align with. Interesting play? Sarah murmured. Coming together but not together. Acknowledging the connection without flaunting. Frey Richard, I agreed. Always managing perceptions. For a moment, Richard's eyes met mine across the room. Something passed between us. Recognition, perhaps, of the chess game we were both playing. He gave a slight nod, which I returned. Then he moved toward a group of architectural clients, expertly inserting himself into their conversation as if nothing had changed. Jessica separated from him, making her way to where several Wallace Development executives stood. Her position was precarious. The former assistant who had slept with the boss, now a vice president reporting to the boss's ex-wife. Yet she navigated the room with remarkable poise, neither apologetic nor overly familiar. Ms. Wallace. The event coordinator appeared at my elbow. We're ready for the formal remarks whenever you are. Traditionally, Mr. Wallace would speak at 8:30. I'll speak at 8:30, I confirmed. Please make the announcement. As I continued circulating, I was struck by how differently people interacted with me now. Gone was the vague politeness, the forgettable small talk reserved for Richard's wife. Instead, clients discussed project details directly. Investors asked pointed questions about future strategy. I was finally visible in my own company. At precisely 8:30, the coordinator tapped a microphone, calling for attention. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the CEO of Wallace Development, Emily Wallace. The room quieted as I took my place at the podium. From this vantage point, I could see everyone clearly, the curious, the supportive, the skeptical. Richard stood near the back, arms crossed, expression carefully neutral. Jessica had positioned herself among the management team, professional and attentive. Thank you all for being here tonight, I began, my voice steady and clear. As most of you have heard, Wallace Development is undergoing some significant changes. I'm honored to address you as the company's new CEO and controlling shareholder. Following Manning Capital Partners' investment in our future, I paused, allowing the formal confirmation of the rumors to settle. For 15 years, Wallace Development has been known for innovative design and strategic vision in commercial real estate. That foundation remains strong. But markets evolve, client needs change, and successful companies must adapt accordingly. Nods of agreement from the business veterans in the crowd. Under my leadership, Wallace Development will be expanding into mixed-use developments that integrate residential, commercial, and public spaces with sustainable infrastructure. We're already in discussions regarding a major riverfront project in Portland that will showcase this new direction. Sarah raised her glass in acknowledgement, drawing curious glances. Change can be challenging, but it also brings opportunity. To that end, I'm pleased to announce several organizational updates that will support our evolving focus. I proceeded to announce Michael's promotion to COO, Jessica's refocused role as VP of Financial Strategy, and several other key appointments that signaled the company's new priorities. With each name, I could see alliances solidifying, uncertainty resolving into clear understanding of the new power structure. None of these changes diminish what Wallace Development has accomplished over the past 15 years, I continued, my tone shifting slightly. The vision and architectural innovation that Richard Wallace brought to this company created a strong foundation for our future growth. I looked directly at Richard as I said this, offering the professional acknowledgement I had promised. His expression remained impassive, but he inclined his head slightly in recognition. Real estate development is about seeing potential where others see only what exists today. It's about transformation, taking something with good bones and making it exceptional. I smiled, allowing a touch of personal sentiment to enter my voice. Sometimes that principle applies to companies as well as buildings. Light laughter rippled through the room. I invite all of you, clients, partners, employees, to join us in this next phase of Wallace Development's evolution. The project models and preliminary designs for our new direction are displayed in the adjoining room. My leadership team and I look forward to discussing them with you throughout the evening. I raised my champagne glass. To transformation. To potential realized. To Wallace Development's future. The crowd echoed the toast, the atmosphere shifting from uncertain to energized. As I stepped away from the podium, people immediately moved toward the displays, eager to see the new vision I had outlined. For the next hour, I moved through the crowd with purpose, addressing questions, outlining plans, connecting key stakeholders with project leaders. The response was overwhelmingly positive, particularly from younger clients and those with sustainability mandates who saw in our new direction alignment with their own corporate values. I was deep in conversation with a potential investor when I sensed Richard's presence beside me. "Emily," he said, his tone professionally cordial. "Could I have a word?" I excused myself from the conversation and followed him to a quieter corner of the ballroom. "That was quite a speech," he said once we were relatively private. "You've clearly been planning this direction change for some time." "Years," I confirmed. "Since you dismissed the mixed-use concept at the Economic Summit, to be precise." He winced slightly. "I deserved that. But I meant what I said in my letter, Emily. You were right about the market trends." "Yes, I was." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared history and separate futures hovering between us. "Chicago?" I asked finally. "Next week, Sorensen and Partners offered me a design director position. No ownership stake, no management responsibilities, just architecture. That suits you." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "It does, actually. I've realized I never particularly enjoyed running a company. I just couldn't bear the thought of ceding control." "Especially to me?" I couldn't help asking. Richard met my gaze directly. "Especially to you, because it would have meant acknowledging that you might be better at it than I was." The honesty was unexpected. "And now?" "Now it's undeniable." He glanced around the room, at the enthusiasm surrounding our new project displays, at the energy that hadn't been present at Wallace Development events in years. "You've been CEO for 2 days, and already the company feels transformed." Before I could respond, Jessica approached, professional and poised. "Excuse me, Emily. The Portland City Commissioner is here and very interested in discussing potential expansion of the Riverfront project to include affordable housing elements." "Thank you, Jessica. I'll be right over." I turned back to Richard. "If you'll excuse me?" He nodded, understanding the dismissal. "Of course. Good luck, Emily, with everything." As I walked away, I heard him add quietly, "You won't need it, though." The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of productive conversations and promising connections. By the time the last guest departed, Wallace Development had secured 2 new project commitments and preliminary interest in 3 more. The new direction was resonating strongly with the market. "Successful night," Michael observed as we watched the cleanup crew begin dismantling the displays. "Very successful." "Just the beginning," I replied, scrolling through the business cards I'd collected. "We have follow-up meetings to schedule, proposals to develop, a new company image to solidify, and a gala to plan for next year," he added. "When Wallace Development will be celebrating its most profitable year yet, under its new leadership." I smiled at his confidence. "From your lips to the market's ears, COO Chen." As we walked toward the exit, I noticed Jessica gathering her things, her expression thoughtful as she surveyed the now empty ballroom. "Jessica," I called. "A moment?" She approached immediately, professional and attentive. "Yes?" "You handled tonight beautifully. Navigating these waters couldn't have been easy." Surprise flickered across her face at the unexpected acknowledgement. "Thank you. I was uncertain how to approach the evening." "With exactly the professionalism you demonstrated." I studied her carefully. "Your position at Wallace Development is secure based on your abilities, not your past relationship with Richard. But that relationship is over, correct? Completely, she confirmed without hesitation. It was a mistake I won't repeat. Good. Because while I value your financial expertise, I need absolute loyalty from my executive team. No divided allegiances. Understood. She met my gaze directly. My commitment is to Wallace Development and its future success, under your leadership. I nodded, satisfied with both her words and the conviction behind them. The Portland project is your priority starting Monday. I want your financial models for the affordable housing component by Wednesday. I'll have them on your desk Tuesday afternoon, she promised. As Jessica walked away, Michael raised an eyebrow. Sure about that one? As sure as I can be about anyone, I replied. She's ambitious, talented, and now fully aware of where the real power lies. That's a combination I can work with. Outside, my driver was waiting with the car. The night air was crisp, hinting at the autumn to come. I looked, back at the hotel, at the banner still hanging above the entrance, Wallace Development Annual Gala. Next year, that banner would look the same. The company name remained unchanged, a condition of my agreement with Richard, but everything else, the leadership, the direction, the energy, that was all different now. All mine. Home, Miss Wallace? My driver asked as I settled into the back seat. Yes, I replied, feeling the truth of the word in a way I hadn't for years. Home. The Portland Riverfront project was taking shape, not just on paper anymore, but in actual construction. I stood at the edge of the 50-acre site, hard hat in place, surveying what would become Wallace Development's signature achievement under my leadership. The mixed-use development had broken ground 2 months ago, ahead of schedule and with unprecedented support from local government, environmental groups, and community organizations. Impressive progress, Sarah Jenkins commented, joining me at the observation point. Your construction team is remarkably efficient. Michael Chen's influence, I replied. His operations background is proving invaluable now that he's COO. And the affordable housing component? Sarah nodded toward the eastern section of the site. That addition caught everyone by surprise. Jessica Reynolds' financial modeling made it viable. Turns out integrating affordable units actually improves the long-term ROI by qualifying the project for additional sustainability tax credits. Sarah smiled knowingly. And it doesn't hurt that it generated glowing press coverage and city council support. That's just good business, I returned her smile. Meeting community needs while maintaining profitability is the future of urban development, something Richard never quite grasped. We walked along the construction perimeter, reviewing progress against the ambitious timeline we'd established. The Portland project had become something of a proving ground, not just for Wallace Development's new direction, but for my leadership specifically. Industry observers, competitors, and former skeptics were watching closely, many expecting me to falter without Richard's architectural vision. Instead, we were thriving. First quarter results showed a 22% increase in new contracts compared to the previous year. The stock price had climbed steadily as investors responded to our refocused strategy. Employee retention had stabilized after an initial period of uncertainty, with several key talents specifically citing the company's new direction as their reason for staying. Seattle Business Magazine wants to feature you in their Women Transforming business issue, Sarah mentioned as we headed back toward the site office. They called me for a quote about working with you. What did you tell them? That you're brilliant, demanding, occasionally terrifying, and exactly what this industry needed. She grinned. Also, that I'm grateful we're partners rather than competitors. Laughed. High praise indeed. Inside the site office, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Call when you can. News about Chicago property. I excused myself from Sarah and stepped outside to make the call. What's happening with Chicago? I asked when Jessica answered. The seller accepted our offer, she replied, excitement evident in her voice. 15% below asking, with all the contingencies we requested. Perfect timing, I smiled. I'm heading back to Seattle tonight. Have the paperwork ready for my signature tomorrow morning and set up a meeting with the design team for the afternoon. Already done. And, Emily, Sorensen and Partners' office is 2 blocks from the Chicago property, Richard's new firm. The connection wasn't lost on me. Noted, but irrelevant. The location meets our criteria regardless of who's working nearby. After ending the call, I took a moment to appreciate the view again. The Portland skyline in the distance, the river gleaming in the afternoon sun, and before me, tangible evidence of my vision becoming reality. 6 months ago, I had been Richard's wife, sidelined, betrayed, almost erased from my own company's story. Now I was Emily Wallace, CEO, making decisions that would shape urban landscapes for decades to come. The journey back to Seattle that evening gave me time to reflect on how much had changed, professionally and personally. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago, with Richard accepting my terms without contest. The house had sold quickly, allowing me to purchase a sleek downtown penthouse closer to the office. My new home was nothing like the suburban residence Richard and I had shared. It was distinctly mine, from the minimalist furniture to the wall of windows overlooking the city I was helping to build. When I arrived at the office early the next morning, Wallace Development Headquarters was already buzzing with activity. The energy had shifted noticeably under my leadership. More collaborative, more innovative, less hierarchical. I'd instituted weekly all-hands meetings where anyone could propose ideas directly to the executive team, resulting in several promising initiatives we might otherwise have missed. "Morning, Emily," Michael greeted me as I passed his office. "Chicago properties a go?" "Signed and delivered," I confirmed. "Jessica's setting up the design meeting for this afternoon. I want you there. Wouldn't miss it. Oh, and the Business Journal called again. They're persistent about that profile piece." I hesitated. Media attention was valuable for the company, but complicated for me personally. Every interview, inevitably, included questions about Richard, about the scandal, about how I'd gained control of Wallace Development. I'd become adept at redirecting those conversations toward our projects and future plans, but it remained an uncomfortable element of my new public role. I'll call them back, I decided, but only if they agree to focus on the Portland project, not personal matters. In my office, no longer Richard's corner suite, but a newly designed space that better reflected my management style, I found Jessica waiting with the Chicago property documents and preliminary concept drawings. "What do you think?" she asked, spreading the drawings across the conference table. I studied them carefully. The Chicago project was our first expansion outside the Pacific Northwest, a significant step for Wallace Development. The concept, a mixed-use development combining retail, office space, and residential units with integrated green infrastructure, built upon the Portland model, but with distinct elements suited to its urban location. "It's good," I said finally, "but not distinctive enough. We need something that makes this uniquely Wallace Development under new leadership. Something that signals we're not just following trends but setting them." Jessica nodded thoughtfully. "I'll have the design team reconsider the community integration aspects. That's becoming our signature element. And the sustainability features. I want this building to set new standards." As Jessica gathered the drawings, she hesitated. "There's something else you should know. I heard from a contact at Sorensen that Richard is their lead architect for the new City Arts Center project. The site is directly across from our Chicago property." I absorbed this information, careful to keep my expression neutral. "Interesting coincidence." "Is it a coincidence?" Jessica asked carefully. "The timing of both projects?" "Whether it is or not doesn't matter," I replied firmly. "We selected that location based on market analysis and growth projections, not because of or in spite of Richard's projects. We'll proceed as planned." Jessica nodded, accepting my decision. I'll have the revised concepts ready for the afternoon. Meeting. After she left, I turned to the window considering this new development. Richard and I, building competing visions directly across from each other in a new city. The symbolism wasn't subtle. Was it deliberate on his part? Perhaps. But it changed nothing about our strategy or my determination to make Wallace Development's Chicago project exceptional. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Emily, Seattle Business Journal, is on line 1 about the profile piece. I took a deep breath, turning from the window. Put them through. 6 months as CEO had taught me many things. Among them was the understanding that my story, however I chose to tell it, had become an inextricable part of the company's new narrative. The woman who had reclaimed her rightful place, who had transformed betrayal into triumph, who was now leading Wallace Development into its most innovative era. Yet it wasn't the story I had expected to tell, but it was one I was increasingly proud to own. Just one more question, Ms. Wallace. Alicia Sanderson, the Business Journal reporter, glanced at her notes. Many of our readers are curious about the message you'd give to other women facing similar challenges in male-dominated industries. What advice would you offer? I considered the question carefully. The interview had gone well so far, focused primarily on Wallace Development's new direction, the Portland project's innovations, and our expansion into the Chicago market. Alicia had respected my boundaries regarding personal matters, only briefly touching on the leadership transition, as she diplomatically called it. I'd tell them that competence speaks for itself, eventually, I replied. But I'd also say, don't wait for recognition to be offered. Claim it. I spent too many years allowing my contributions to be overshadowed, believing that good work would naturally be acknowledged. And now? Now I understand that visibility isn't vanity, it's necessity. Especially for women. If you're doing exceptional work, make sure people know it came from you. Alicia nodded, jotting down my response. That's a powerful message, and it leads to what many consider the most remarkable aspect of your story. You didn't leave to start your own company or join a competitor. You reclaimed the one you helped build. Wallace Development was always partly mine, I said firmly. I wasn't about to abandon it. One last thing, Alicia said, stopping the recorder. Off the record, is it true that your ex-husband is working on a project directly across from your Chicago development? I smiled slightly. You've done your research. Yes, it's true, but that's not why we chose the location. Quite a coincidence. Business is full of them. I stood, signaling the end of the interview. Thank you for focusing on the company's achievements, rather than gossip. I appreciate professional journalism. After Alicia left, I turned my attention to the afternoon's design meeting for the Chicago project. The team had incorporated my feedback, enhancing the community integration elements and pushing the sustainability features beyond industry standards. The result was impressive, a development that would not only transform its immediate neighborhood, but potentially influence urban planning approaches throughout the Midwest. This is exceptional work, I told the assembled team, genuine pride in my voice. Especially the rooftop community gardens and the integrated affordable housing units. This will set a new standard for mixed-use development. Jessica beamed. Her financial models had made the enhanced features viable, proving that social responsibility and profitability weren't mutually exclusive. When do we break ground? Michael asked, reviewing the timeline. 3 months, I confirmed. I want to move quickly on this. The Chicago market is heating up, and we need to establish our presence there before costs increase further. As the meeting concluded, my assistant appeared at the door. Emily, there's a call you might want to take. Sarah Jenkins from Portland. I excused myself to take the call in my office. Sarah, what's up? Just got out of a meeting with Portland's mayor, she said, excitement evident in her voice. The city wants to expand our riverfront project to include a technology innovation hub. They're offering additional tax incentives and expedited permits if we can integrate it into the current development. That's significant, I replied, mind already calculating the implications. Send me the details. I'll have Jessica run the numbers and get back to you tomorrow. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. 6 months as CEO, and Wallace Development was already exceeding the ambitious goals I'd set. The Portland project was ahead of schedule. Chicago was moving forward with an innovative design, and now a potential expansion that would further cement our reputation as leaders in community-integrated development. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Heads up. Richard just announced the Arts Center project in Chicago. Press release going wide. Mentions proximity to other upcoming developments in the area. I smiled wryly. Richard still couldn't resist subtle digs, but they no longer had the power to affect me. Wallace Development's success under my leadership spoke louder than any veiled reference in a press release. My assistant appeared again. Your car is ready whenever you are. The executive dinner at Canlis is at 7:30. Thank you, Claire. I'll leave in 10 minutes. The quarterly dinner with Wallace Development's executive team had become something of a tradition under my leadership. A chance to celebrate successes, address challenges, and strengthen the bonds that made us effective as a management team. Tonight's gathering at Seattle's premier fine dining restaurant was particularly significant, marking 6 months since the leadership change. As I gathered my things, I glanced at the framed magazine cover on my wall, Business Forward's Innovators, in Urban Development issue, featuring a photo of me standing on the Portland construction site, the river and skyline behind me. The headline read, Emily Wallace redefines mixed-use development and her company's future. It was the first major industry publication to recognize me individually, without reference to Richard or the scandal of our professional and personal separation. The first to acknowledge my vision on its own terms. I touched the frame briefly before turning off the office lights. Recognition was satisfying, but it wasn't what drove me. What mattered was seeing my ideas taking physical form in Portland, soon in Chicago, and eventually in cities across the country. Buildings that would stand for decades, embodying principles of sustainability, community integration, and innovative design. Richard had taught me many things during our 15 years, together, some intentionally, others through his failures. Perhaps the most valuable lesson had come at the end, that I was fully capable of leading without him, that I always had been. The limousine was waiting when I reached the lobby. As the driver held the door, I caught my reflection in the polished surface, confident, focused, entirely comfortable in my role as CEO. Canlis Restaurant, I told the driver as I settled into the back seat. And could we take the route past the waterfront? I'd like to see the sunset over the bay. As the car pulled away from Wallace Development headquarters, my building, my company, my vision, I felt a moment of perfect clarity. The path forward wasn't about proving Richard wrong or even proving myself right. It was about creating something meaningful, something lasting, something that was, at long last, undeniably mine. The Chicago wind lived up to its reputation, whipping around the construction site with enough force to make the ceremonial hard hats a necessity, rather than just photo props. I stood at the podium, the weight of the moment not lost on me as cameras flashed and city officials looked on with approving smiles. Today marks not just the groundbreaking for a new development, I addressed the assembled crowd, but the beginning of Wallace Development's expansion beyond the Pacific Northwest. This project represents our commitment to creating spaces that serve communities, strengthen economies, and set new standards for sustainable urban design. 9 months after taking control of Wallace Development, I was officially breaking ground on our most ambitious project yet, the Chicago Gateway, a mixed-use development that would transform an underutilized area into a vibrant neighborhood hub. The ceremonial shovel felt solid in my hands as I turned the first scoop of dirt, symbolically launching a project that would take 2 years to complete, but would establish us as a national player in urban development. Ms. Wallace, reporters called as I stepped away from the podium. Is it true Richard Wallace is working on the Arts Center across the street? Any comment on competing directly with your ex-husband? Was the location choice deliberate? I maintained. My professional smile, having anticipated these questions. Wallace Development selected this location based on thorough market analysis and growth projections. We wish all neighboring developments success, as a thriving district benefits everyone. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a construction schedule to review. As I moved toward the site office with Michael and Jessica flanking me, I caught sight of a familiar figure observing from the perimeter. Richard, looking much the same as when I'd last seen him 6 months ago at the gala, watching the proceedings, with an unreadable expression. Our eyes met briefly across the distance. He nodded once, a gesture I returned before continuing on my way. That was unexpected, Michael murmured, as we entered the temporary structure serving as our project headquarters. Not really, I replied, removing my hard hat. The Arts Center groundbreaking is next week. He's probably here doing site inspections. Should we be concerned? Jessica asked, her tone carefully neutral. About information leaks or competitive issues? I shook my head. Richard's many things, but not underhanded in business. Besides, these are completely different projects serving different purposes. There's no real competition. The meeting with the construction team progressed efficiently, reviewing timelines, addressing potential challenges, and confirming material deliveries. Wallace Development's Chicago team was still taking shape, a mixture of relocated Seattle, staff and local hires selected for their expertise in the Midwest market. They were eager, talented, and fully aligned with my vision for the company's future. That's everything for today, I concluded as the meeting wrapped up. I'll be back in 3 weeks for the progress review. Until then, daily updates to Jessica and weekly reports to me directly. As the team dispersed, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Jenkins. Portland Tech Hub approved by City Council. Front page tomorrow. Call me. Good news from every direction. The Portland project continued to exceed expectations, with the Technology Innovation Hub Edition generating significant positive press and attracting potential tenants before construction was even complete. Chicago was now officially underway, and early discussions about potential sites in Austin and Denver were progressing well. Dinner at Gibson's at 7, Michael reminded me as we prepared to leave. The investors are eager to celebrate the groundbreaking. I'll meet you there, I replied. I want to take another walk around the site first. Once alone, I stepped back outside, surveying what would eventually become Wallace Development's Chicago flagship. The vision was clear in my mind, steel and glass rising from the current emptiness, the ground floor alive with retail and public spaces, the upper levels housing offices and residential units designed to foster community while maintaining privacy. Sustainable features integrated throughout, from rainwater collection systems to solar panels disguised as architectural elements. Ambitious project. I turned to find Richard standing a few feet away, hands in the pockets of his overcoat against the Chicago chill. It's a good site, I replied neutrally. Congratulations on the Arts Center commission. The renderings I've seen look impressive? Thank you. He gestured toward the space between our respective sites. They're talking about creating a pedestrian plaza connecting the two projects. City planner's idea, not mine. I've seen the proposal. It makes sense from an urban flow perspective. An awkward silence fell between us. Former partners, now competitors, of sorts, standing on the precipice of our separate futures. You've done well, Richard said finally. The Portland project is receiving excellent coverage. Industry people are noticing. That was always the point, wasn't it? To be noticed for our work? He smiled slightly, acknowledging the pointed reference to his past behavior. Fair enough. How's Sorensen treating you? I asked, genuinely curious about his new role. It's different. Being responsible only for the architecture, not the business aspects. He shrugged. Surprisingly liberating, actually. I'm doing my best work in years, I'm glad to hear that. And I realized with some surprise. The anger that had fueled me in those early days had gradually transformed into something more complex. Not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition that Richard's betrayal had ultimately led me to claim the role I should have had all along. "Emily," he began, then hesitated. "The reason I came over, there's something you should know. RTG Ventures has approached Sorensen about acquiring them. If it happens, I'd be working for the same company that tried to buy Wallace Development." I absorbed this information, understanding the professional courtesy behind his warning. "I appreciate you telling me. Has anything been finalized?" "Not yet. Preliminary discussions." He looked uncomfortable. "I considered declining the arts center when I learned about your project here, but that seemed petty." "It would have been," I agreed. "We're both professionals. We can coexist in the same industry, even the same city block." Richard nodded, relief evident in his expression. "Well, I should let you get back to your investors. I just wanted to clear the air given the circumstances." As he turned to leave, I found myself saying, "Richard?" He paused, looking back questioningly. "Your letter," I said, referring to the note he'd left in our house after moving out. "You wrote that the company would thrive under my leadership, that it probably should have been mine years ago. I meant it." "I know. Thank you for saying it, even then. Something passed between us. Not reconciliation or forgiveness, but a moment of mutual recognition. Of the partnership we'd once had, the mistakes that had destroyed it, and the separate paths we now walked. Good luck with the Arts Center," I said. "Good luck with Gateway," he replied, then added with a hint of his old confidence. "Though from what I've seen of your plans, you won't need luck." After he walked away, I remained for a few minutes more, watching as the construction crew secured the site for the evening. The Chicago skyline provided a dramatic backdrop, silhouetted against the setting sun. In 2 years, Wallace Development's first Chicago project would be part of that iconic view, a permanent marker of the company's evolution under my leadership. My phone buzzed again. Michael, sending the restaurant address and reminding me about dinner with the investors. I texted back a confirmation and headed toward my waiting car. The encounter with Richard had been unexpected but strangely affirming. We had both moved on to new chapters, him finding renewed creative focus without management responsibilities, me building Wallace Development into the company it always had the potential to become. As my driver navigated through Chicago's evening traffic, I reviewed mental notes for the investor dinner, the Portland Technology Hub expansion, the promising talks with Austin city planners, the preliminary site assessments in Denver. Wallace Development was growing exactly as I had envisioned when I took control 9 months ago. "We're here, Ms. Wallace," the driver announced as we pulled up to Gibson's Steakhouse. I checked my reflection in the compact mirror. Composed, confident, ready to continue building the relationships that would fuel Wallace Development's national expansion. The woman looking back at me bore little resemblance to the betrayed wife who had discovered her husband's affair, or even the determined businesswoman who had outmaneuvered Richard in the boardroom. This was Emily Wallace, CEO, the woman whose vision was reshaping skylines across the country, the woman who had found her own voice at last. The Wallace Development Annual Gala had undergone a transformation as significant as the company itself. Gone was the stiff formality of previous years, replaced by a vibrant energy that reflected our new direction. The venue, Portland's recently completed tech innovation hub, part of our riverfront development, showcased exactly what we'd accomplished in the year since I'd taken control. "Quite a statement, holding it here," Sarah Jenkins commented, champagne flute in hand as we surveyed the gathered crowd from a mezzanine overlook. "Everyone walking through living proof of your vision." That was precisely the point, I acknowledged. Nothing demonstrates our new direction more effectively than experiencing it firsthand. Below us, the central atrium buzzed with activity. Industry leaders, investors, employees, and local officials mingled against the backdrop of what Business Forward had recently named the most innovative mixed-use development in North America. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the illuminated Portland skyline and the river beyond, while sustainable design elements, from the living green walls to the advanced energy systems, were highlighted with tasteful lighting and informational displays. Seattle Business Journal just arrived, my assistant Claire murmured, appearing at my elbow. They're requesting a brief interview about the Forbes recognition. 10 minutes in the conference room, I agreed. And make sure the photographer has access to the rooftop garden for the backdrop they requested. The Forbes Most Innovative Companies list had named Wallace Development among its top 50, the first time we'd received such recognition. The accompanying profile had focused on our rapid transformation under my leadership, highlighting the Portland project's integration of technology, sustainability, and community spaces as a model for future urban development. Emily. Michael. Chen approached, accompanied by two distinguished-looking men. Allow me to introduce Thomas Rodriguez and William Chen from Austin City Planning. They've just toured the technology hub and are quite impressed. I greeted them warmly, knowing they represented a crucial relationship for our planned Texas expansion. Perfect timing. I'm hoping the experience helps visualize what we've been discussing for downtown Austin. It's extraordinary, Rodriguez acknowledged. Particularly the way you've integrated affordable housing without compromising the project's aesthetic or commercial viability. That's Jessica Reynolds' financial modeling, I explained. She's revolutionized how we approach mixed income development. As if summoned by her name, Jessica appeared, tablet in hand. Sorry to interrupt, Emily, but Chicago's sending through the updated completion timeline. We're now 3 weeks ahead of schedule. The news sent a ripple of satisfaction through me. Gateway was progressing even faster than our ambitious projections, positioning us to begin tenant move-in before the upcoming holiday season, a significant advantage in the competitive Chicago market. Excellent. Let's discuss the marketing implications tomorrow, I replied, then turned back to the Austin officials. Gentlemen, Jessica is our VP of Financial Strategy and the architect of our integrated development approach. She'll be leading the financial planning for the Austin project, should you select Wallace Development. The subtle pitch wasn't lost on them, nor was the clear message that women held key leadership positions throughout Wallace Development, a deliberate shift I'd implemented and one that had attracted notice throughout the industry. After completing the necessary introductions and excusing myself for the scheduled interview, I made my way to the conference room where the Seattle Business Journal waited. The questions were predictable, focused on our rapid growth, the successful completion of the Portland project, progress in Chicago, and plans for further expansion. Wallace Development has undergone remarkable transformation under your leadership, the reporter observed. Was this always your vision, even when you co-founded the company with Richard Wallace? Elements of it were always there, I replied carefully. The focus on innovative design and strategic location selection has been part of our DNA from the beginning. What's evolved is our emphasis on community integration, sustainability, and mixed-use functionality. And the company culture has changed significantly as well, from what I understand. I nodded. We've implemented a more collaborative approach, with diverse perspectives at every level of decision-making. The results speak for themselves: increased innovation, improved employee retention, and projects that better serve their communities, because more voices are included in their creation. Any comment on Richard Wallace's recent success with the Chicago Arts Center? It's been nominated for several design awards. I smiled, having anticipated this question. Richard is an exceptional architect. His creativity and vision were always assets to Wallace Development, and it's no surprise he's continuing to produce award-worthy designs at Sorensen. We wish him continued success. The response was practiced but genuine. A year had provided enough distance for me to acknowledge Richard's talents without any lingering bitterness. Our projects in Chicago were progressing on parallel paths, his art center nearing completion as our gateway development rose across the pedestrian plaza that would eventually connect them. Different visions serving different purposes, yet ultimately contributing to the same revitalized district. After concluding the interview, I rejoined the gala, circulating through the crowd with practiced ease. This was perhaps the most significant change of all. My comfort in the spotlight, my confidence in claiming the public role that came with leadership. No longer Richard's supportive wife in the background, but Emily Wallace, CEO, at the center of her company's narrative. "There she is," a familiar voice called as I approached the bar. Jessica stood with a group of younger employees. Champagne glass raised slightly in my direction. The woman who transformed Wallace Development and took us national in just 12 months. The small group applauded, somewhat tipsy but clearly genuine in their admiration. I had worked hard to build connections with employees at all levels, particularly the younger staff who represented the company's future. These recent graduates and early career professionals responded enthusiastically to my leadership style and the company's new direction. The transformation was a team effort, I reminded them, accepting a sparkling water from the bartender. Every one of you contributed to our success this year. As the evening progressed, I finally found a moment of relative solitude on the rooftop garden, my favorite feature of the technology hub. The space combined functional urban agriculture with gathering areas and spectacular views, demonstrating how even dense urban developments could incorporate natural elements and food production. "Quite a view," Sarah Jenkins commented, joining me by the railing. "And quite a year, Emily." "It's gone by remarkably fast," I acknowledged. "Did you imagine this level of success when you took control?" "Honestly?" I considered the question. "I knew the potential was there. But the speed with which everything has come together, the Portland completion, Chicago's progress, the Austin negotiations, the industry recognition, that's exceeded even my optimistic projections." "And personally?" Sarah asked, her tone softening. "Has that aspect been what you expected?" The personal question would have seemed intrusive from most people, but Sarah had become something between a business partner and a friend over the past year. She understood, perhaps better than anyone, the complex journey I'd navigated. "Professionally, I've never been more fulfilled," I replied honestly. "Building something meaningful, seeing my vision take physical form, leading a company that's making a positive impact, it's deeply satisfying." "But?" Sarah prompted, sensing the unspoken qualification. I smiled slightly, but I hadn't anticipated how consuming it would be. The CEO role doesn't leave much room for a personal life. "That's a choice, not an inevitability," she observed. "Some of the most successful people I know maintain rich lives outside their executive roles." Before I could respond, Michael appeared at the garden entrance. "Emily, sorry to interrupt. The mayor's about to leave and hoping to speak with you before he goes." "Duty calls," I said to Sarah with a rueful smile. As I moved toward the elevator, my phone buzzed with an email notification. Preliminary concept drawings from our Denver team for the Mountain View project we were developing. Another city, another opportunity to reshape urban spaces according to my vision. The next morning, as my private jet departed Portland for Seattle, I found myself reflecting on Sarah's words about balance. The past year had been extraordinary professionally. Wallace Development had exceeded every metric I'd established, our reputation had soared, and my personal standing in the industry had never been stronger. Yet there was truth in her gentle challenge. I had thrown myself completely into rebuilding and expanding the company, allowing little space for anything else. At first, that single-minded focus had been necessary, proving myself, establishing my leadership, demonstrating that Wallace Development could not just survive, but thrive without Richard. But now, with the company stable and growing, perhaps it was time to reconsider that balance. Not to step back from leadership, never that, but to ensure that my life contained more than boardrooms and construction sites, however satisfying they might be. As the plane began its descent into Seattle, I gazed out at the familiar skyline. The Wallace Development Headquarters, my building, stood prominently among the skyscrapers, a visible reminder of where this journey had begun a year ago. Richard had left for his assistant. I had kept and transformed his company. But the greatest transformation had been my own. The email arrived while I was reviewing the final touches for the Chicago Gateway's grand opening. "Congratulations," it began. "We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as one of this year's recipients of the Urban Development Visionary Award." I stared at my screen, momentarily stunned. The Visionary Award was the industry's highest honor, recognizing individuals whose work fundamentally changed approaches to urban planning and development. Previous recipients included architectural legends and development pioneers whose innovations had reshaped skylines across the globe. "Everything okay?" Jessica asked, noticing my expression as she entered my office with the Gateway opening schedule. "I've been selected for the Visionary Award," I said, still processing the news. Jessica's professional composure broke into genuine excitement. "Emily, that's extraordinary. The committee almost never recognizes someone so early in their leadership tenure." "That's what makes it so surprising," I agreed, forwarding the email to her. "The ceremony's in New York next month." As Jessica read the details, I gazed out at the Seattle skyline, reflecting on the 18 months since I'd taken control of Wallace Development. The Portland Riverfront project was now fully operational and had exceeded financial projections by 22%. Chicago Gateway was days away from its grand opening, already fully leased with a waiting list for both commercial and residential spaces. Austin and Denver developments were underway, with preliminary discussions beginning for projects in Atlanta and Boston. The committee specifically cited your integrated approach to mixed-use development, Jessica noted, looking up from her tablet, and the way you've incorporated affordable housing and sustainable design without sacrificing profitability. "Our approach," I corrected. "This recognition belongs to the entire company." "The nomination came from the Urban Planning Institute," she continued, her expression turning thoughtful. "They don't typically submit names for consideration unless what? Unless someone influential suggested it." Jessica hesitated. "The Institute's current board chair is Elizabeth Sorensen." The connection registered immediately. Elizabeth Sorensen, founder and principal of Sorensen and Partners, Richards, current firm. "You think Richard had something to do with this?" Jessica shrugged slightly. "It's possible. He certainly knows your work deserves recognition." Before I could respond, my assistant appeared at the door. "Michael's on the line from Chicago. The mayor wants to move his remarks to earlier in the opening ceremony." "Tell him that's fine," I replied, shifting back to the immediate priorities. "And let's finish the Gateway opening details before my flight." The news about the award remained in the back of my mind as we completed preparations for Chicago Gateway's launch. The development represented Wallace Development's most ambitious project yet. A true urban village integrating retail, office, residential, and public spaces within a striking architectural design that honored Chicago's tradition while pushing boldly into the future. 3 hours later, I was airborne, Seattle fading behind me as my company jet headed east toward Chicago. The cabin was quiet. I'd chosen to travel alone rather than with the usual team of executives, needing time to prepare mentally for the high-profile opening and the media attention it would generate. I opened my laptop, intending to review my remarks for tomorrow's ceremony, but found myself searching for information about the Urban Development Visionary Award instead. The list of past recipients was indeed prestigious, a who's who of industry innovators whose contributions had defined modern urban landscapes, and now somehow I would be joining them. My phone signaled an incoming text, Michael, confirming final security arrangements for tomorrow's event. As I responded, Another message arrived from an unknown number. Congratulations on the Visionary Award. Well-deserved recognition. R. Richard. The simplicity of the message was characteristic of him, as was the timing. He'd clearly heard about the award even before it was publicly announced. But had he been involved in the nomination, as Jessica suggested? After a moment's hesitation, I replied, "Thank you. Looking forward to seeing Chicago Gateway and the Arts Center finally completed." His response came quickly. The pedestrian plaza connecting them turned out better than either of us anticipated. The mayor's quite pleased with how the projects complement each other. The exchange was professional, cordial, a world away from the tension that had characterized our interactions during the divorce and company transition. Time and distance had transformed our relationship into something neither personal nor adversarial, but rather a mutual professional respect between industry peers. When my car pulled up to Chicago Gateway the following morning, the scene was controlled chaos. Media crews setting up equipment, staff making final adjustments to decorations, security personnel checking credentials. The building itself rose 18 stories into the clear autumn sky, its distinctive silhouette already becoming a recognized part of the city's architectural landscape. "Emily," Michael greeted me at the private entrance. "Everything's on schedule. The mayor arrives in 30 minutes and the first tour groups are already gathering in the lobby." "Perfect." I handed him my coat, taking in the completed atrium for the first time. What had been construction dust and scaffolding on my last visit was now soaring space, filled with natural light that played across the living green walls and water features we'd incorporated into the design. "It's magnificent," I said softly, allowing myself a moment of pure appreciation before the day's demands took over. "Wait until you see the rooftop," Michael grinned. "The garden is already fully planted and the views are spectacular." For the next hour, I moved through a carefully choreographed series of interactions, greeting VIPs, speaking with media, reviewing last-minute details with the event team. Throughout it all, I maintained the composed professional presence that had become my public trademark, even as excitement and pride threatened to break through. 5 minutes until the mayor's remarks, my assistant reminded me. "Then you'll introduce the architect before your closing speech." I nodded, moving toward the temporary stage erected in the central plaza. The crowd had grown substantial. Local politicians, business leaders, prospective tenants, and curious Chicago residents all gathered to witness the official opening of a development that had transformed an entire city block. From my position near the stage, I could see across to the Chicago Arts Center, Richard's project, now completed and operating as one of the city's premier cultural venues. The pedestrian plaza between our buildings was filled with people moving easily between the two spaces, exactly as the urban planners had envisioned. And then I saw him, Richard, standing at the edge of the crowd, observing the ceremony from a respectful distance. Our eyes met briefly across the plaza. He nodded once, a gesture I returned before turning my attention to the mayor's introduction. The ceremony proceeded smoothly, the mayor praising the development's contribution to Chicago's architectural heritage, the lead architect explaining the design philosophy, and finally, my own remarks about Wallace Development's vision for integrated urban spaces that served communities while advancing sustainability goals. Chicago Gateway represents not just a building, I concluded, but a philosophy that thoughtful development can create economic value while enhancing quality of life for all city residents. Wallace Development is proud to establish our Midwest presence with a project that embodies these principles so completely. The applause was gratifying, but even more so were the conversations that followed as guests toured the completed spaces, genuine appreciation for the innovative elements we'd incorporated, from the affordable housing units indistinguishable, from luxury condos to the energy systems that made Gateway one of the city's most efficient buildings. Hours later, as the formal events concluded and the last media crew packed up their equipment, I found myself alone on the rooftop garden, taking A rare moment of quiet reflection amidst the day's intensity. Impressive achievement. I turned to find Richard crossing the rooftop toward me, hands in the pockets of his overcoat against the Chicago evening chill. "Thank you," I replied. "The Arts Center is equally impressive. I toured it last month." "I heard." He smiled slightly. "My staff was quite excited to have the famous Emily Wallace visiting." The description would have once seemed absurd. I had spent so many years as Richard's background partner, the invisible half of Wallace Development. Now, industry publications regularly featured my perspective and approach, sometimes without mentioning Richard at all. "The Visionary Award," I said, watching him carefully. "Did you have something to do with that?" Richard didn't deny it. "I suggested to Elizabeth that the Institute consider your work. The selection committee made their own decision based on merit." "Why?" He seemed surprised by the question. "Because you deserve it. What you've accomplished in 18 months, Portland, Chicago, the national expansion. It's extraordinary work, Emily. Work that should be recognized." I studied him, trying to discern any hidden agenda in his support. "It's unexpected, that's all. Given our history." "Our personal history is separate from professional recognition," he said simply. "I've always respected your abilities. I just failed to acknowledge them properly when we were together." The understatement hung in the cool evening air between us, acknowledgement of his past behavior without excuses or justifications. "Well," I said finally, "thank you for the nomination. It means something, coming from you." Richard nodded, understanding the complexity behind my words. "I should let you get back to your celebration. I just wanted to stop by and say congratulations. On Gateway, on the award, on everything you've built." As he turned to leave, I found myself asking, "Are you happy, Richard? At Sorensen?" He paused, considering the question. "I am, focusing. Purely on design, not managing the business aspects. It suits me better than I expected. I'm doing my best work. I can see that in the Arts Center. It's genuinely extraordinary." A small smile touched his lips. High praise from a Visionary Award recipient. After he left, I remained on the rooftop a while longer, watching as Chicago's lights came on against the deepening dusk. Below me, Gateway, hummed with activity, new residents moving in, retail spaces preparing for tomorrow's first official business day, the plaza connecting to Richard's Arts Center flowing with pedestrians enjoying the mild evening. Two visions, once unified, then painfully separated, now complementing each other across an open plaza. There was poetry in it, I realized, a physical manifestation of how Richard and I had evolved from partners to adversaries to respectful peers, each contributing our distinct strengths to the urban landscape. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Car waiting whenever you're ready. Team celebration dinner at 8. I took one last look at the Chicago skyline, at the building that represented Wallace Development's successful expansion beyond its Pacific Northwest origins, at the vibrant district taking shape around our flagship project. Richard had left me for his assistant, had attempted to sideline me professionally, had nearly cost me the company we'd built together. And now, 18 months later, I was receiving the industry's highest honor while Wallace Development thrived under my leadership. Some might call it justice. But as I headed toward the elevator, I recognized it as something more valuable: vindication. Not just of my business, acumen or leadership abilities, but of my decision to fight for what I had helped build instead of walking away. The company, the building, the future. All of it, at last, unmistakably mine. The Visionary Award ceremony in New York was more elaborate than I had anticipated. A black-tie gala at the Plaza Hotel with over 500 industry leaders in attendance. As I stood at the edge of the pre-ceremony reception, taking a moment to gather my thoughts before the inevitable networking began, I felt a sense of having come full circle. 2 years earlier, I had attended industry events like this one as Richard's wife, professionally invisible despite my contributions, relegated to supporting conversations about his achievements rather than discussing my own. Now I was the center of attention, one of 5 honorees whose work was being celebrated as transformative to the industry. Emily Wallace, a warm voice greeted me. Marcus Bennett, Riverview Partners. Congratulations on the recognition. I shook his extended hand, recognizing the name of one of the largest development firms on the East Coast. Thank you. Your Harborside project in Boston was quite influential on our Portland approach. Bennett looked pleased at the acknowledgement. High praise from someone who's redefined mixed-use development so dramatically. I've been following your work since the Portland Riverfront launched. Very impressive trajectory. Before I could respond, a photographer approached, requesting pictures of the honorees together. As I moved toward the designated area, I caught sight of Jessica and Michael entering the ballroom, having flown in to support me at the ceremony. I'd been touched by their insistence on attending, recognizing it as a gesture that went beyond professional courtesy into genuine friendship. The next hour passed in a blur of introductions, photographs, and conversations, some brief and superficial, others unexpectedly substantive about Wallace Development's approach and future plans. By the time we were called to be seated for dinner, I had collected a dozen business cards from developers interested in potential collaborations or investments. Quite the industry response, Michael observed as he joined me at the front table, reserved for honorees and their guests. I've been watching. Everyone wants 5 minutes with the visionary Emily Wallace. I smiled at his teasing tone. Visibility has its advantages. 3 serious partnership inquiries already, including Riverview. For the Boston Waterfront project, Bennett approached you personally? Jessica asked, impressed. They rarely work with outside firms. Apparently, they've been following our progress since Portland. They're particularly interested in our community integration model. Our conversation paused as the ceremony began. Elegant introductions, a video presentation showcasing each honoree's work, and finally, the award presentations themselves. When my name was called, I approached the podium with measured confidence, accepting the distinctive glass sculpture that represented the industry's highest recognition. Thank you, I began, facing the assembled leaders of urban development and design. This honor is especially meaningful because it recognizes not just aesthetic innovation, but integrated impact, how development can simultaneously serve economic, social, and environmental goals without sacrificing any of them. I spoke briefly about Wallace Development's philosophy, acknowledging the team that had helped implement my vision. As I concluded, I found myself adding something unplanned. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge Richard Wallace, whose architectural vision helped establish the foundation upon which Wallace Development continues to build. Our approaches have evolved in different directions, but the commitment to excellence remains a shared value. The acknowledgement felt right, not diminishing my own achievements, but recognizing the complex reality of Wallace Development's history without bitterness. As I returned to my seat, the applause was substantial, affirming that the industry had fully embraced my leadership and direction. After the ceremony concluded, the evening transitioned to a more relaxed reception where honorees mingled with attendees. I found myself approached by increasingly senior industry figures, CEOs of major firms, investment partners, even the mayor of a significant Midwestern city interested in bringing Wallace Development's approach to his downtown revitalization. Ms. Wallace, a distinguished silver-haired man in an impeccable tuxedo, approached as I finished a conversation with the Urban Land Institute's director. Victor Harrington, Harrington Global. I wonder if I might have a word in private. The name registered immediately. Harrington Global was a multinational development corporation with projects on 5 continents, vastly larger than Wallace Development, and known for strategic acquisitions of promising smaller firms. Of course, I replied, intrigued by his approach. We moved to a quieter corner of the ballroom, away from the main reception crowd. First, congratulations on the well-deserved recognition, Harrington began. Your transformation of Wallace Development has been remarkable to observe. Thank you. That's generous coming from someone of your experience. He smiled slightly. Not generosity, recognition of exceptional achievement. Which brings me to the purpose of my approach. Harrington paused, his expression turning more focused. How would you feel about bringing Wallace Development into the Harrington global family of companies? Though I maintained a neutral expression, the directness of the question caught me by surprise. I wasn't aware Harrington was looking to acquire in the Pacific Northwest. We're interested in acquiring excellence wherever we find it, he replied smoothly. Wallace Development's innovative approach to mixed-use development, particularly your community integration models, represents exactly the kind of forward thinking we value. I'm flattered by your interest, I said carefully. But Wallace Development isn't currently seeking acquisition. Perhaps not actively seeking, Harrington acknowledged. But I hope you'll consider our proposal. He produced a slim envelope from his jacket's inner pocket. This outlines the preliminary terms we'd be prepared to offer. The numbers, I believe, speak for themselves. I accepted the envelope, tucking it into my evening bag without opening it. I'll review it, but I should be clear that my vision for Wallace Development has always involved independent growth. Independence has its merits, he agreed. But scale creates opportunities that even the most innovative mid-sized firm can't access alone. Imagine your approach applied globally, Ms. Wallace, with Harrington's resources behind you. The proposition was undeniably compelling. Wallace Development's methodology expanded to international markets, backed by one of the industry's largest players. Before I could respond, Michael appeared at my elbow. Sorry to interrupt, but the Boston Chronicle is hoping for a few minutes for their special feature on the honorees. I nodded, turning back to Harrington. I'll consider your proposal and respond after I've had time to review it properly. That's all I ask, he replied, offering his card. I'm in New York through Friday if you'd like to discuss further. As Michael and I moved toward the waiting journalist, he murmured, Harrington Global? What was that about? An acquisition offer, apparently, I said quietly. He gave me preliminary terms. Michael's eyebrows rose. That's significant. They rarely approach firms our size unless they're very serious. Let's focus on the Chronicle interview, I said, shelving the unexpected development for later consideration. We can discuss Harrington's proposal tomorrow. The remainder of the evening continued without further surprises, though I found my thoughts occasionally returning to the envelope in my evening bag and the possibilities it represented. By the time I returned to my hotel suite, it was past midnight, but I felt too energized for sleep. I opened the balcony doors, letting in the cool night air and the distinctive sounds of Manhattan at night. New York's skyline glittered before me, a testament to generations of visionaries who had shaped its distinctive profile. Now I held in my hands a proposal that could potentially expand my influence from regional developments to global urban landscapes. Finally, I removed the envelope from my evening bag and opened it. The terms outlined were staggering, a valuation of Wallace Development far beyond what even the most optimistic market analysis would suggest, with additional performance incentives that could double the initial amount. Harrington was offering life-changing wealth, along with a senior executive position within their global structure. My phone chimed with a text from Jessica. Breakfast meeting tomorrow at 8? Need to discuss Austin permit acceleration. Business continued, regardless of award ceremonies or acquisition offers. I confirmed the meeting, then set aside Harrington's proposal for the clear-headed consideration it deserved in the morning. At breakfast, I shared the basics of Harrington's approach with Michael and Jessica, watching their reactions carefully. The valuation is extraordinary, Jessica acknowledged after reviewing the terms. At least 30% above market, possibly more depending how you calculate the earnout structure. But it would mean losing control, Michael noted, voicing the concern that had kept me awake into the early hours. Becoming a division of Harrington rather than an independent entity. Harrington has a reputation for allowing acquired companies significant operational autonomy, Jessica countered, especially when the leadership is seen as adding unique value. Initially, perhaps, I said, having researched their acquisition history overnight. But within 3 to 5 years, most acquired firms are fully integrated into the Harrington approach. The three of us spent the next hour analyzing the offer from every angle: financial benefits, operational implications, personal considerations. By the time we finished, the path forward was clear to me, though not without complexity. Set up a meeting with Harrington for tomorrow morning, I instructed Jessica. I'll give him my answer in person. Later that day, between media interviews, about the Visionary Award, I received an unexpected email from Richard. Heard Harrington approached you at the ceremony. Their standard acquisition playbook. Call if you want perspective from someone they pursued last year. The offer of insight was surprisingly welcome. Despite our complicated history, Richard understood the industry dynamics and had clearly navigated similar waters with Harrington previously. After a moment's consideration, I called him. "Congratulations again on the award," he said when he answered. "The acknowledgement in your speech was unexpected but appreciated." "It seemed appropriate," I replied. "About Harrington. They made a formal offer. The terms are exceptional." "They always are," Richard confirmed. "They approached Sorensen last year with a similar premium valuation. Elizabeth ultimately declined." "But you thought she should accept?" I guessed from his tone. "I saw the strategic benefits," he acknowledged. "But I also understood her reluctance to surrender control of what she'd built. It's not a simple calculation." "Emily." "No," I agreed. "It isn't." "What's driving your consideration?" he asked. "The financial upside? Global expansion possibilities? Or something else?" The question was insightful, cutting to the heart of my internal debate. Partly the scale potential. Wallace Development's approach implemented globally could genuinely transform urban development practices. "But," Richard prompted, hearing the hesitation in my voice, "but I've spent the past 2 years reclaiming and rebuilding Wallace Development as an independent entity under my vision. Selling to Harrington feels contradictory to that journey." Richard was quiet for a moment. "For what it's worth, I think you've already proven everything you needed to prove. To the industry, to yourself, possibly even to me. Whatever decision you make now would be from strength, not necessity." His perspective was surprisingly valuable, an acknowledgement that my leadership had already established itself beyond question. The choice before me wasn't about validation, but strategic direction. "Thank you, Richard. That's actually helpful. Just returning the professional courtesy you showed in your acceptance speech," he replied. "Good luck with your decision." The following morning, I met Victor Harrington in his company's Manhattan offices, a sleek space occupying the top 3 floors of a midtown skyscraper with commanding views of Central Park. His greeting was warm but calculating, a veteran executive, accustomed to acquisition negotiations. "Have you had a chance to review our proposal?" he asked once we were seated in his corner office. "I have," I confirmed. "It's a generous offer that recognizes the value Wallace Development has created." "But?" He smiled slightly, evidently detecting the qualification in my tone. "But I've decided to decline." Harrington's expression registered surprise, then thoughtful reassessment. "May I ask why?" "The financial terms are substantially above market valuation." "The decision isn't primarily financial," I explained. "Wallace Development's independence is fundamental to our identity and approach. What we've built over the past 2 years reflects a specific vision, one that requires the freedom to evolve on its own terms. Even the most innovative vision benefits from proper scaling, Harrington countered. What you've accomplished regionally could transform global urban development with the right resources behind it. Perhaps, I acknowledged, but not yet. Wallace, development is still defining its methodology, still proving its model across different markets. Premature integration into a larger corporate structure would risk diluting what makes our approach unique. Harrington studied me for a long moment, then nodded with what appeared to be genuine respect. You're turning down life-changing wealth to maintain control of your vision. That's increasingly rare in this industry. Not wealth versus vision, I corrected gently, but appropriate timing and terms. Wallace Development may consider strategic partnerships in the future, but only when they enhance rather than compromise our core approach. Fair enough. He rose, extending his hand. The offer remains open, Ms. Wallace. When you're ready to discuss terms that would satisfy your concerns about independence, Harrington would still be interested in bringing Wallace Development into our family. I shook his hand firmly. I appreciate the interest in our work, and I wouldn't rule out future conversations under the right circumstances. As I left Harrington's offices and headed toward the waiting car, I felt an unexpected lightness. The decision to decline the acquisition offer, to prioritize independence and vision over immediate financial reward, clarified something essential about my relationship with Wallace Development. 2 years ago, when I discovered Richard's affair, and realized I legally owned the company headquarters, my actions had been driven partly by hurt, partly by determination not to be erased from the company I had helped build. I had fought to take control of Wallace Development because it was rightfully mine. But somewhere along the way, through the Portland project's success, Chicago Gateway's completion, the expansion into new markets, and now the industry recognition, my connection to the company had evolved. Wallace Development wasn't just something I owned or controlled. It had become the primary vehicle for my creative vision, my approach to urban development, my impact on the built environment. Not Richard's company that I had reclaimed, but truly, my own creation, shaped by my leadership and values. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Austin City Council approved the expedited permitting. We're good to break ground next month. Another step forward. Another opportunity to implement the Wallace Development approach in a new market. Another chapter in the story I was writing, not as Richard Wallace's ex-wife, but as Emily Wallace, visionary urban developer. As my car navigated through Manhattan traffic toward the airport, I gazed at the city's iconic skyline, a physical manifestation of generations of architectural and development vision. Somewhere within that dense urban landscape, Wallace Development would eventually make its mark, not as part of Harrington Global, but as an independent force reshaping how cities evolved for the communities they served. Richard had left me for his assistant. I had kept his company. And now I had declined a fortune to maintain control of the vision that had always been mine. The symmetry felt right. The future, at last, entirely my own to shape. 5 years to the day after I discovered Richard's affair, I stood in the lobby of Wallace Development's newest headquarters, a striking 22-story tower in downtown Seattle that embodied everything we had become under my leadership. Sustainable design elements were seamlessly integrated with community spaces. Affordable housing units coexisted with luxury condominiums, and innovative office configurations supported the collaborative work culture I had established. The board, members are gathering in the main conference room, Jessica informed me, tablet in hand as she approached. The acquisition team just arrived as well. I nodded, taking a final moment to appreciate the space we had created. Tell them I'll join them in 5 minutes. 5 years. It seemed both an eternity and an instant since that evening when I'd found Jessica's email on Richard's laptop, since the moment I'd discovered I legally owned the building that housed our company, since I'd made the decision to fight for what was rightfully mine. Now Wallace Development had projects in 12 cities across the country. an international expansion underway with developments planned in Toronto and London, and a reputation as the industry leader in integrated urban design. The company employed over 300 people: architects, engineers, financial specialists, community engagement experts, all aligned with the vision I had established. And today, in a twist that still sometimes seemed surreal, we were finalizing the acquisition of Sorensen and Partners, Richard's architectural firm. The acquisition hadn't been my idea initially. Michael had brought the possibility to my attention 6 months earlier, when Elizabeth Sorensen announced her retirement and intention to sell the company she had founded 30 years ago. Strategically, it makes perfect sense, he had argued, during our executive committee meeting. Their architectural expertise complements our development approach. The client portfolios have minimal overlap but significant synergy. And bringing design capability in-house would streamline our project timelines considerably. All valid points. Yet the personal dimension couldn't be ignored. The fact that acquiring Sorensen meant Richard would effectively be working for me, designing buildings for Wallace development projects unless he chose to leave. What does Richard think about this possibility? I had asked Jessica privately, knowing she maintained occasional professional contact with him through industry events. He's surprisingly open to it, she'd replied. His focus has been exclusively on design since joining Sorensen. From what I understand, he's less concerned about organizational structure than having the freedom to pursue innovative architectural approaches. After careful consideration, I had authorized the acquisition team to proceed with due diligence. The financial case was strong, the strategic fit undeniable. Whatever personal complications existed seemed manageable given the professional framework we would establish. And so here we were, 5 years after our acrimonious separation, preparing to bring Richard's architectural practice under the Wallace development umbrella. Life's ironies never ceased to surprise me. I smoothed my jacket, a tailored emerald suit that projected confidence and authority, and headed toward the conference room. The space occupied the building's top floor with panoramic views of Seattle and the Puget Sound beyond. At the center, a massive table crafted from reclaimed timber, harvested from the Portland Riverfront project site, symbolized our commitment to sustainability and our history. The room fell quiet as I entered. Board members, legal counsel, the acquisition team, and Sorensen representatives all rose in acknowledgement of my position, a gesture of respect I had earned through 5 years of exemplary leadership and results. "Good morning," I greeted them, taking my place at the head of the table. Today represents a significant step in Wallace Development's evolution. The integration of Sorensen's architectural expertise with our development capabilities creates a uniquely positioned firm able to control quality and innovation across the entire project lifecycle. Elizabeth Sorensen, elegant in her 70s and still radiating the authority that had made her a pioneer in a male-dominated field, nodded in agreement. After 30 years building Sorensen and Partners, I wouldn't entrust its legacy to just anyone. Wallace Development's approach to urban design aligns perfectly with our architectural philosophy. This union makes sense on every level. As the meeting progressed through final terms, integration plans, and leadership structure, I was acutely aware of Richard's absence. We had agreed he would not attend this session, avoiding any potential awkwardness that might distract from the business proceedings. He would join the afternoon reception celebrating the completed acquisition. 2 hours later, with signatures applied and handshakes exchanged, Sorensen and Partners officially became a division of Wallace Development. The board members dispersed to prepare for the afternoon reception, while the executive team remained to address immediate integration priorities. "Communication to all staff goes out at noon," Michael confirmed. "HR has prepared detailed information, packages addressing compensation alignment, benefits transition, and reporting structures. The design teams are already working on merged concepts for the Boston Waterfront project," Jessica added. "Initial feedback suggests significant efficiency improvements from the integrated approach." I nodded, pleased with the seamless execution. "And the Chicago office transition?" Scheduled for next week, Michael replied. Richard has agreed to oversee the process personally, ensuring minimal disruption to ongoing projects. Richard. Even after 5 years of separation, professional and personal, his name still carried a certain weight in conversation. Not painful anymore, not after all this time and everything I had built, but significant nonetheless. The man who had once been my partner in every sense, who had betrayed that partnership, and who now, through an unexpected turn of events, would be designing buildings under the Wallace Development banner. Emily? Jessica's voice pulled me from my thoughts. The catering staff needs access to the reception area. Should I authorize that now? Yes, go ahead. I gathered my notes, refocusing on the immediate tasks. I'll be in my office until the reception. Let me know when Elizabeth arrives. My office, a corner suite with views in 2 directions, designed to my exact specifications when we constructed the new headquarters, had become something of a museum to Wallace Development's evolution under my leadership. Models of our signature projects lined the credenza. Awards, including the visionary recognition from 3 years earlier, occupied a dedicated wall. Media features and industry recognition filled digital frames that rotated through our most significant achievements. I moved to the window, gazing out at the Seattle skyline that now included 3 distinctive Wallace Development projects alongside the original headquarters building that had started everything, the building I had legally owned, the leverage point that had allowed me to reclaim my rightful place. We had kept that original building in the company portfolio, though our operations had long since outgrown it. The structure that Richard had designed and I had financed remained a reminder of our shared beginning, now repurposed as an incubator for design innovation and community-focused startups. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Richard's here. Early? In the lobby. Wanted to know if you had a few minutes before the reception. I considered the request, surprised by the timing but not by the courtesy behind it. Richard and I had maintained a carefully professional relationship in the years since our divorce. Occasional encounters at industry events, brief exchanges about projects when our firms' work intersected, mutual acknowledgement of each other's achievements. Send him up, I replied. Minutes later, a knock at my office door heralded his arrival. Richard looked much the same as he had at our last meeting 6 months earlier, silver now dominant in his dark hair, lines around his eyes testifying to the passing years, but still carrying himself with the confident posture of a successful architect. Emily, he greeted me, remaining near the doorway until I gestured him inside. Impressive space. The integration of natural elements with the structural design is particularly effective. Thank you, I replied, appreciating his professional assessment. Would you like to sit? He chose one of the chairs facing my desk, glancing around at the evidence of Wallace Development's success under my leadership. Congratulations on the acquisition. Elizabeth is genuinely pleased with the arrangement. It's a good fit strategically, I acknowledged, taking my seat. Her legacy will be preserved and enhanced as part of Wallace Development. And mine? The question was direct but not confrontational, a practical inquiry about his position in the new structure. Your role remains as we discussed. Design director with creative autonomy on assigned projects, reporting to the chief design officer who reports directly to me. Your expertise is a significant asset we intend to utilize fully. Richard nodded, seemingly satisfied with the confirmation. Then, after a brief hesitation, may I speak candidly, Emily? Not as a new Wallace Development employee, but as someone with a complicated shared history? Of course. I maintained my professional composure, though curious about what he might say after all these years. There's a certain symmetry to this moment that isn't lost on me, Richard began, his tone reflective rather than bitter. 5 years ago, you discovered you owned our building and used that leverage to take control of the company I thought was primarily mine. Now you're acquiring the firm I joined after our separation. Business is full of unexpected cycles. I.e. observed neutrally. Indeed. He smiled slightly. But this isn't just about business, is it? Not entirely. I considered his implication carefully before responding. If you're suggesting this acquisition is some form of delayed revenge, not at all, he interrupted. I know you better than that. Wallace Development's decisions under your leadership have been consistently strategic and forward-thinking. This acquisition makes perfect business sense. He paused. But I can't help thinking about what brought us to this point. About my mistakes. Richard, please. He held up a hand. I need to say this, and the reception isn't the right setting. He took a deep breath. I've never properly apologized for what I did. The affair, yes, but more importantly, the years of gradually sidelining you professionally while benefiting from your talents, of claiming credit for our shared achievements, of making you invisible in your own company. The directness of his acknowledgement caught me by surprise. We had maintained carefully professional interactions since our divorce, never venturing into personal territory or revisiting past wounds. What prompted this now? I asked, seeing what you've built with Wallace Development over the past 5 years. His gesture encompassed the office, the view, the evidence of success surrounding us. You've created something remarkable, Emily. Something far beyond what we achieved together. It's forced me to recognize how much I limited you, and consequently, limited what the company could become. I absorbed his words, finding unexpected validation in his recognition. I appreciate that acknowledgement. It's long overdue. Richard looked down briefly, then met my gaze directly. I'm not seeking forgiveness or reconciliation. Those ships sailed long ago. But as we enter this new professional arrangement, I wanted to clear the air. To acknowledge that while the path here was painful, the outcome has been extraordinary. For you, for Wallace Development, even ultimately for me. How so for you? I asked, genuinely curious. Being freed from management responsibilities at Sorensen allowed me to refocus on pure architectural design. I've done my best work in these past 5 years. A small, self-deprecating smile. And now that work will contribute to Wallace Development's vision, bringing me full circle in a way I never anticipated. The irony wasn't lost on me. Life rarely follows a predictable path. Clearly. He gestured toward the view of Seattle, at the skyline we had both helped shape through our work. 5 years ago, if someone had told me I'd eventually be working for you, designing buildings for a company called Wallace Development that no longer included me as a principal, you'd have laughed, I finished for him. Probably, he acknowledged, or been outraged. But now, he shrugged slightly. Now it feels like an appropriate resolution, the right person leading the company, the right structure for my contributions. His words settled between us, not an apology seeking absolution, but an honest recognition of where we had been and where we now stood. Two professionals who had once been partners in every sense, now finding a new equilibrium that acknowledged both our history and our separate journeys since. Well, I said after a moment, I look forward to seeing how Sorensen's architectural expertise enhances Wallace Development's projects. Your design sensibility has always been exceptional, Richard. That hasn't changed. He nodded, accepting the professional acknowledgement. And your vision for urban development has proven transformative. I'm curious to see what we might achieve with our talents aligned rather than divided. The conversation had taken an unexpected turn from potential awkwardness into something resembling closure, a mutual recognition of past failings and future possibilities that neither of us had anticipated when he requested this meeting. My phone buzzed with a reminder. The reception starts in 15 minutes, I noted. We should probably head down. As we rose, Richard hesitated briefly. One last thing, Emily. I'm genuinely proud of what you've accomplished, not just professionally, but personally, having the courage to stand up for yourself when I gave you every reason not to fight for what you deserved rather than walking away. Thank you, I said simply. The words didn't erase the past, but they acknowledged a truth we both recognized, that the path to this moment, however painful, had led to outcomes neither of us could have predicted. Together, we walked toward the elevator, two people with a complicated history preparing to enter a new professional chapter. As we descended toward the reception where the official announcement would be made, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. 5 years ago, I had discovered my husband's affair with his assistant through an accidental email notification. I had learned that he had been gradually erasing my contributions to our shared company while preparing to sell it without my knowledge. I had realized that the building housing our headquarters was legally mine alone, the leverage point that allowed me to reclaim my rightful place in the company I had helped build. Richard had left me for his assistant. I had kept and transformed his company. Now, in a final twist that completed the circle, I had acquired his architectural firm, bringing his design talents back under the Wallace Development umbrella, but this time on my terms, within my vision, under my leadership. As we entered the reception where employees from both companies mingled, cameras flashed to capture the symbolic moment. Emily Wallace, CEO of Wallace Development, and Richard Wallace, former husband and now head of architectural design, standing together to mark the acquisition of Sorensen and Partners. "Ready?" I asked quietly as we paused at the entrance. Richard nodded, professional courtesy firmly in place. "Your company, your announcement." "Wallace Development," I corrected with a small smile, acknowledging the name we still shared despite everything. Still carrying forward the work we both value, just differently than we once envisioned. Together, we stepped into the reception, ready to announce the next chapter in the story that had begun with betrayal and now culminated in an unexpected form of professional reconciliation. 5 years after the worst night of my life, I stood as the unquestioned leader of an industry-defining company, bringing my ex-husband's architectural firm under my corporate umbrella, transforming urban landscapes across the country. Not the future either of us had envisioned, but unmistakably, perfectly mine.